We are off to a late start. I must apologize. My sister was determined to get together today before she leaves tomorrow to go back to Ohio. So I spent a little longer with her than I anticipated. So my apologies for the lateness of the start. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Um, it, the stream length was under 6 hours, and we'll be cutting out all the breaks and speeding it up. So here we go.
Please be seated. We are back on the record in State versus Turney. Let the record show the presence of counsel, the defendant, and the jury. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see you back this morning. Thank you so much for making it back on time. Let's see. I found out this morning that you all were waiting for the jury bus, I think on Monday, for an unfortunately long period of time. I've now learned when the jury shuttle bus driver takes a lunch break. So you all have now educated me as to when that is, and I will do my best to avoid you having to wait in the event that we break early any further days. So my apologies for that. Let the record reflect that Detective Summershoe is back on the witness stand, sir. I will remind you that you are still under oath. And Ms. Hicks, you may resume your cross-examination of the witness whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sir.
Angela, he needs headphones.
While he's getting headphones, I'm going to hand you a document, okay?
Okay. Ms. Hicks, if you want to speak so that your client can make sure it's okay.
Detective, do you recognize that document?
Yes, it's a supplement I generated in the investigation.
Now, Detective, as part of your investigation, and we talked about this yesterday, you reviewed several cell phone bills and records. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Detective, did you have a cell phone in the early 2000s?
Yes.
So back in the early 2000s, if someone had a cell phone, it normally would include only home coverage or home network coverage, right?
I'm not sure.
Well, normally if you had a cell phone, you would purchase a cell phone plan and it would cover mostly the area that you lived in.
I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking.
That's all right. Sir, are you familiar with what roaming charges are?
Yes.
Can you please explain that to the jury?
Roaming charges are, I guess, expenses that a company would charge you if you're outside of a particular area, if you, I guess, outside the country or outside a particular area.
Right. So, Detective, when you reviewed some of Mr. Turney's phone bills, you came across a phone bill from June 2001. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I handed you a document that has, if you turn to the second page, in about the top portion of the page, there's a paragraph that you wrote about roaming charges that Mr. Turney had in June 2001.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, counsel, which supplement number is it?
275.
Thank you.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, there were also several calls that were made to California numbers,
Yes.
and you noted that.
Yes.
Several calls received from California numbers.
Well, in my supplement document, there was a California cellular number that where calls are made to.
Your supplement also says that there were several calls received from California numbers as well.
I believe that's a reference to the roaming. I'd have to look at the bill again to take a look at that.
Okay. Detective, you also testified on direct examination that the usage of star 69 had been used before in the home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Detective, you also know that at the time, Mr. Turney had 2 teenagers in the home.
Yes.
So you don't know who it was that was using star 69?
No.
Detective, yesterday you testified that Mike had been in the military,
Yes.
that he was a deputy sheriff for 4 years in the 1970s,
Yes.
that he had an investigator's license.
Yes.
But you didn't mention that he was also an electrician.
Yes, he was.
He was a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
Yes.
So part of your responsibilities, you reviewed the case file,
Yes.
previous supplements,
Yes.
you reviewed numerous letters,
Yes.
numerous conversations,
Yes.
emails.
Yes.
Now, as part of your review of the case file, did you review any communications between Mike to police chiefs,
Yes.
congressmen,
Yes.
the FBI?
Yes.
Now, I don't want to go into the contents of those communications, but based on your review of those communications, is it fair to say that Mike was dissatisfied with the investigation?
There were some letters that were praising the police, and there were some letters that were he was complaining about the police and government. And
Sure. And we had been, yesterday we had talked about one of those letters from early on in the investigation where he was praising the police, right?
Yes.
But there was also a lot of other communications where he was not.
True.
Sir, as part of your investigation in this case, you reviewed information from one of Alyssa's coworkers, Chris Rittenauer.
Yes.
Now, Chris worked at the Jack in the Box with Alyssa,
Yes.
and Chris wrote a letter about Alyssa after she went missing.
Yes, at the behest of the defendant.
Did you review that letter?
Yes.
Now, as part of your review, did you also read a description written by Alyssa's supervisor at Jack in the Box?
Yes.
And you learned information about a person at the Jack in the Box where Alyssa worked.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Just a moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, may counsel approach?
You may. On the record.
Sir, based on your reading of the 2 letters that we referenced, you learned of a individual who was identified as having contact with Alyssa.
There was a person that the defendant named. Yes.
But those letters weren't written by the defendant, yes or no?
They were written at his request.
Okay. Sir, as part of your investigation, you interviewed John Lackman.
Yes,
He was the boyfriend of Alissa Turney at the time of her disappearance.
he was.
And at some point in the investigation, you learned information that Sarah said that she witnessed John Lackman violently grab Alissa.
Yes, Sarah said that.
Alissa had bruises.
Yes,
Alissa had an injured hand.
yes,
And you asked Mr. Lackman about physical violence between him and Alissa.
yes,
He said no.
correct.
And you never confronted him with the information Sarah gave you.
Yes, I did. We asked about the injured hand. He said that was due to he accidentally closed the door on her hand, and he said it wasn't a serious injury.
Well, sir, you didn't include that in your supplement. Is that correct?
I believe there is a supplement with that.
Would you like to refresh your recollection?
Sure.
Sir, did you ask him about violently grabbing Alissa?
I think I asked in general, is there any violence between you two?
So you didn't specifically ask him about violently grabbing her?
No.
Did you ask him about bruises on her face?
No.
Okay. Now, sir, you were the case agent later on in this case, correct?
Yeah, from late 2016 to early 2017.
But before you were the case agent, there were other detectives who were assigned to the case as the case agent, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So early on in the investigation, Detective Schoenfelder was the case agent.
He was the original detective, yes.
Now, you testified on direct that the way Detective Schoenfelder handled the investigation is the way that you would not have handled it.
Correct.
You testified yesterday that had you received the file that you would have gone out and canvassed the neighborhood.
I said that's a possible investigative technique. We would
Sure.
use.
You said that you would have interviewed Alyssa's friends and family.
Yes.
And Detective, I'm sure you're aware that there are no supplements from Detective Schoenfelder in this case.
Yes.
So there is no record of any investigation that was done by Detective Schoenfelder.
Yeah, there's no documentation of what he did in the investigation.
Just a moment, Your Honor. So I want to ask you a couple of follow-up questions about the letter from Chris Rittenauer.
Okay.
So you testified that he wrote that at the behest of Michael Turney.
Yes.
But does anywhere in the letter it say that Michael Turney was making him write that letter?
No.
GoDaddy is a partner that always puts you first. Start today at GoDaddy.com.
All right, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks. Any redirect, Mr. Imbordino?
On that note, Detective, do you recall the defendant stating that he had asked Alyssa's friends to write letters?
Yes, there's a number of her friends that he contacted and requested they write letters and asked them to put certain things in the letters.
Now, Ms. Hicks yesterday asked you about a transcript of a primetime interview, and so that nobody gets confused here, let me step you through this. So there's the broadcast. There's a live broadcast, correct?
Correct. Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't live. It was broadcast on TV.
That's what. Yeah. Thank you. But so what she showed you was a transcript of an interview done of the defendant. But did all of that, everything said in that transcript, make it onto the broadcast?
No, ABC on their website had published the raw interview transcript, which it wasn't the entire show. That was the entire interview they put on. That's what she showed me.
Do you recall watching the clips from the broadcast yesterday?
Yes.
Do you recall the defendant saying, in response to a question from Mr. Keonis, that he told, these are my words, I don't mean to imply they're the direct words, of the defendant, that he had told the police that he watched that tape and there was nothing on it.
Yes.
And at some point, the defendant makes a statement that he watched the entire 8 hours from the day, correct?
Yes.
And there was nothing on it.
Yes.
So Ms. Hicks indicated the defendant said in another statement that he asked Detective Schoenfelder if he wanted it. So I guess he was asking him, do you want this tape that has nothing on it?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you this. If somebody came to you in an investigation and said, I have a blank VHS tape,
Objection, speculation.
Overruled. This is a hypothetical. You may continue.
and it had nothing on it, is it going to help you in your investigation?
No, a blank tape wouldn't. No.
On the other hand, if the defendant had provided police or you with the actual recording from that day, might that have been helpful to you?
Yeah, that recording would have a lot of information. It would show Alissa and the defendant coming home. It would show us what Alyssa's wearing. It would show their interaction. It would show the defendant leaving and then presumably Alissa leaving after that, if the story that he told us was accurate.
I believe Ms. Hicks asked you a question. Isn't it true that you didn't find VHS recordings from every day? These are not her words. Every day in the life of this family.
Correct.
Now, keeping in mind, I think I asked you yesterday, did these VHS tapes that you did review, did they have time and date stamps?
No, they did not.
But in any event, was May 17th, 2001 like every other day in their lives?
Yes.
Well, what was different about it?
Well, that's the day that Alissa disappeared.
So wouldn't a tape from that day be a little more important than some ordinary day?
It would probably be the most significant tape in this investigation.
Ms. Hiss asked questions that there possibly might have been another phone in the bedroom linked landline. In other words, two phones, same landline number, correct?
Yes.
Did the defendant ever say that the reason he did not have this recording was because he answered the phone in the bedroom?
No, I never saw a statement like that.
Now, let me ask you about a couple of questions about cell phone records. And in fairness, had you had the case back in 2001, might you have attempted to obtain cell phone records at the time?
Yes.
And I don't know if you know, you can tell us if you know the answer to this, but for example, today, under today's technology, it is possible to obtain information giving you a general location from where a phone call is made and where it's received on a cell phone, correct?
Yes. The phone companies record cell sites that are used as part of their routine business. It helps us lead to a geographic location.
Do you know whether that existed in 2001?
It did, not to the level of sophistication of today, but yes, it did.
And in order to obtain, so for example, if you've mentioned that there were calls from the defendant's cell phone to the landline or to Alissa's cell phone number, correct?
Yes.
So in 2001, you might have been able to get information from the phone company as to where the defendant's cell phone was located generally when he made that call,
Yes.
or where Alyssa's cell phone was at when that cell phone received that call.
Yes.
Now, obviously that wasn't done, correct?
Correct.
What would you have had to do in order to get that information?
Phone companies only maintain that information for a short period of time. Typically, it's 90 days, unless law enforcement puts a request in to preserve that information. They call it a preservation letter. So that would be the first step, and then follow that up with a search warrant or a court order.
And in this case, that wasn't done, correct?
No.
So when you and Detective Anderson were assigned the case in 2008, it was too late.
Yeah, the information was already gone.
In that same area, a record showing a call received by Alyssa's cell phone, for example, showing at least a call that lasted for approximately 7 minutes. I think you mentioned one of those, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on May 17th, correct?
Yeah, it's at 109.
So it's based on your investigation and information provided by the defendant. That was Alyssa's cell phone number, right?
Yes.
But because the record shows that that cell phone received a call and there was some sort of conversation, perhaps, or a message for 7 minutes, does that tell you who answered the phone?
No, it only shows a phone call was made and it lasted for 7 minutes.
Do you recall whether there were star 69 charges? Well, whether star 69 was used after Alissa went missing?
Yes, we found bills that indicated pretty common usage of that.
So the cell phone records that we have in evidence, correct me if I'm wrong, they are from April, May, and June. I don't
Yes.
remember if there's some from July, but at least April, May, and June.
That's correct.
Oh, thank you.
Keep forgetting to turn it on. Sorry. Detective, I'm going to put exhibit number 1 on the screen. Ms. Hicks asked you some questions about this note yesterday, I believe.
Mr. Imbordino, we'll get that on the screen in just a moment.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I can see it over here.
Yeah, our system is brand new, which would make you think that it would be perfect, but it's not. Are you on Visualizer? Try going to something else and then back to Visualizer. There we go.
Thank you. All right, you've seen this before, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Hicks asked you yesterday, and you stated that a forensic examination revealed that, in the opinion of the examiner, this was Alyssa's handwriting, correct?
Correct.
Does this document tell you when it was written?
No, they're not able to tell that.
Is there a date on this document?
No.
Now, I have a couple of questions in reference to the various statements the defendant has made about May 17th. First of all, did he ever say that he took Alissa to school that day?
No.
Did he ever say that he took Alissa and Sarah together to go to school that day?
No.
Let me ask you to assume, Detective, that Sarah testified in this case. This is assume that she did. Her recollection was they got home around sometime, I think she said between 4 and 4:30. Picked her up from her friend's house. Okay.
Okay.
Do you recall the defendant speaking with somebody from Primetime in a pre-broadcast interview?
Yes.
Do you recall him saying that he believed he and Sarah got home after dark?
Yes.
And dark in May of 2001 would have been approximately what time?
Probably after 7 p.m.
In that interview, did he tell them that he picked Sarah up at a friend's house?
Yes.
In another interview, did he say that he went to the school buses were not there? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Now, keeping in mind the various statements the defendant has made, and in particular, when he said, you remember, did the defendant say in various statements, I picked her up from school early, we went to lunch and then went home?
Yes.
In this note, you see anywhere where Alissa wrote, I decided to leave after we went to lunch and you brought me home?
No.
In this note, does she say anything about hating the defendant and that she's leaving because he's monitoring her life too much?
No.
In this note, it appears she's blaming Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah, there's a line there that it seems to have some venom towards her, but not towards the defendant.
She indicates in this note that she was saving money on her own, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that she had a credit union account where she had $1,800 approximately in that account,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
I have just a moment. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Imbordino. Ladies and gentlemen, any members of the jury have any questions for the witness? Looks like we have a few. Jasmine, we're at 3. Okay. Counsel, please approach off the record. Detective Summershoe, I've got some questions from the jury. Why did it take approximately 7 years for the police to search Alissa's belongings? Let's get closer to that.
Again, Detective Anderson and I took on the case in 2007. The work that was done by the prior detectives, in my opinion, probably could have been better. So yeah, it wasn't done. So when we took over the case, there was many things that we did that probably should have been done before.
Why did it take approximately 7 years for the police to canvass the neighborhood?
It would be the same answer on that too.
Why did so much investigation start in the fall of 2008 versus earlier?
We had a new supervisor in the unit, and he was looking at older cases that needed work, and that was one of the ones that he focused on. And he was the one that approached me and Detective Anderson about working on the case.
All right. So this question is a little bit out of order, so I'm happy to reread it to you once we get to the end. Are the two tapes identical? The one submitted to the police by Mr. Turney and the one recovered by the search warrant, referencing the tape of Alissa and Jonathan Lackman and the copy of the tape. You want me to reread it?
No, I think I have. They appear to be the same recording.
Are there any other video or audio tapes that had copies? I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
Okay.
counsel.
Yeah, I believe there was some duplication in the recordings. I did find another recording of the John and Alissa tape, but it was somewhat damaged, wasn't working as well as the other ones.
Thank you. Ms. Hicks, does the defense have any follow-up questions to the juror questions?
Yes, just a moment, Your Honor. Sir, going back to the question about the video that the police received, can you clarify? There was a video that Mr. Turney provided to the Phoenix Police Department about that was the fight, right?
Yes.
Do you know if when the police conducted the search, when they found that video, if it was a longer video or if it was just of the fight?
I believe it was just of the segment of the tape that was given to us.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. I thought maybe.
I was waiting for the defense to finish their
I'm
questions.
sorry, we were waiting for.
Oh,
I apologize.
when you're done, if you'll just give me a no further questions,
That
that
was my
would.
fault. I apologize.
All right. Any follow-up questions to the juror questions from the state?
No further questions.
May the witness be excused.
Yes.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may be excused. And the state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Judge. State calls Detective Anderson.
Sir, if you'll please come forward and be sworn by the clerk. Sir, if you'll please take a walk up that ramp, and once Detective Summershoe has cleared the area, please feel free to have a seat on the witness stand.
Hey, Mr. Bailey, do you want to show that picture again? Okay.
Counsel, whenever you're ready, you may proceed with your direct examination of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let us know when you're ready, Detective Anderson.
I am ready, sir.
All right. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is William Anderson. I'm a detective. I work for the City of Phoenix Police Department. I've been an officer there since the year 2000, approximately 23 years. I've worked for the City of Phoenix since 1996 in another professional capacity.
All right. Let's briefly talk about some of the training you have received while the.
Mr. Bailey, if you'll adjust that microphone so the jury can hear you, actually point it towards you. There you go.
That's the trick, Judge. All right. If you could briefly tell us about the training that you initially received to become a police officer.
Certainly, I attended the Alissa Academy, Arizona Law Enforcement Academy. It is actually run and located within the City of Phoenix, down in South Phoenix. My training is going to be pretty much identical, as is the pedigree to what Detective Summershoe has already stated.
That's fine, but let's talk a little bit about just some of that basic training, the things that go on at the academy. I'm not sure he covered that.
Certainly. At the academy, there's a physical regiment to the training. There's drill instruction. We do the basic defensive tactics, things like that. We do a number of scenario-based trainings for practical applications, practical safety, while you're actually performing the duties of a police officer. Beyond that, it is highly academic. It is an intensive evaluation of the Arizona revised statutes, the laws that govern our state.
I apologize if I missed it, but does that training go over things like interviews?
Yes, there's also interview training. You're taught the skills of observation. The reason you're seeing me in person instead of a telephonic interview is because it's necessary for you to see me, to see my reactions to your questions, to evaluate whether I'm being truthful or dishonest or subversive. That can only be obtained when you have that face-to-face interaction.
You said you initially started working and still work with the Phoenix Police Department?
I do.
This academy that you attend, are other law enforcement agencies also training there?
Absolutely. Alissa is the largest academy in the state of Arizona. My graduating class had Tempe officers, Glendale officers, Gilbert officers, Yavapai County, Mojave County, a number of different agencies, including Department of Public Safety and Indian Reservation, Salt River Pima Indian Reservation.
All right. Now, if you could, well, just to, I guess, piggyback off that a little bit, or in the same vein, do you receive, after you do your time at the academy and finish that, do you receive additional training after that while with the Phoenix Police Department? And I'm talking about the very short, maybe a couple months to a year after you've graduated.
Absolutely. We actually have a pre-academy. So Phoenix officers specifically go through a pre-academy with just Phoenix recruits and Phoenix officers. I go through the 18-week academy in that mixed environment. At the end of that, I'm sworn in as an officer. Beyond that, I have a post-academy, again, specifically with Phoenix to acclimatize me to our rules and regulations, the expectations, how our shifts are run, what my duties are going to be. When I'm assigned to my first precinct, and everybody starts in uniform answering 911 calls, when I'm assigned to my first precinct, I go through an FTO process, field training officer process.
Right. And you said you've held a number of positions with the Phoenix Police Department throughout your career. Could you tell us some of those, specifically what you were doing back in 2008?
In 2008, I will go through my whole spiel if that's all right. In 2000, I became a sworn officer. I was assigned to the Central City Precinct. That's where I met Detective Summershoe for the first time. We were both patrol officers. During my 7 years in patrol, we advanced to the point that we became the field training officers for new recruits graduating the academy. We would very often work in concert on the same recruit. I would have them for a number of weeks, and then I would pass them along to Stuart Summershoe for the second phase of their training before they're released on their own as fully functional independent officers. Beyond my 7 years in uniform, I tested to be involved in investigations. I've spent all my investigative career in the Family Investigations Bureau. Specifically, my first assignment was domestic violence investigations involving family members, issues within a home.
All right. And well, do you receive special training to go into the family violence or family a bureau that you were in?
Yes, with everything, with every assignment, there is a mentoring capacity. You are going to be assigned with one, if not more, other seasoned detectives. They explain your workflow, how you're going to handle your cases, appropriate interviewing techniques. Specific to interviewing, I'm also AFIT certified. I know that's alien, but that's advanced forensic interview training. That's what gives me the ability to engage with children under the age of 18 and to perform competent interviews with them without leading them or corrupting their opinions.
I neglected to ask, but in that the academy, do you receive at least some initial training on how to deal with runaway reports?
Yes, with missing persons. And as I became a missing persons detective, I ended up going back and teaching that very class to new recruits.
Right. Do family crimes involve a dynamic that requires an advanced level of interview training?
It does. You are not dealing with random people on the street that have no emotional involvement to the person that they're accusing of causing them some harm. Domestic violence specifically, you are dealing with lifelong relationships. You are dealing with husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, people who have children in common. They are intimately woven together. That requires, I'm not pretending to be highly skilled or anything like that, but you need to be aware of those situations that will warp people's testimony, that will alter what people are willing to tell you about the situation in their home.
Now, in 2008, what unit were you in?
I did a year or so in a domestic violence unit. And again, that's under the umbrella of family investigations. At that time, Detective Summershoe had gone to the missing persons unit. An opening was presented in missing persons. Everything with Phoenix is competitive. You have to test to go to it. Missing persons is not a entry-level investigative detail because of the nature of the investigations that it contains. I tested. I was lucky enough to get the position, and I began working in September of 2008.
So I take it from what you said, the missing persons unit is a unit within the Family Investigations Bureau?
Yes, Family Investigations Bureau includes the largest segment is obviously the domestic violence, just due to the volume of those calls. It also houses sex assaults, crimes against children, sex offender notification, and my current detail, internet crimes against children.
So when you went to, you said you had additional training for the Family Investigations Bureau. Do you receive additional training beyond testing for the missing person unit?
Absolutely, yes. There are a number of certifications that are required so that I can access and actually influence and add information into ACIC and NCIC, Arizona Crime Information Center, National Crime Information Center. The ability to enter somebody as a missing person is not universal to law enforcement. It is specific to missing persons detectives.
And ma'am, if you will let us know, we have a court reporter taking everything down, ma'am. If you will let us know if you are talking too fast.
One too many monsters today, sorry.
So you're now, at this time, you're in the missing person unit. You received some additional training. And what are your responsibilities within that unit?
I have never been a cold case investigator. From the day I went to missing persons, I had a portion of the queue, which is the end of the alphabet. I had literally the letters S through Z. So any missing adult or any missing juvenile who had a last name starting with the letter S through Z became my responsibility. That's a daily duty. There are going to be calls coming in. Phoenix is a large enough environment that I'm guaranteed to get a report every day just because of the volume of these events within the city.
I guess we failed to talk a little bit about the unit itself, so I apologize. Backtracking a little bit, how is the unit structured organizationally?
Organizationally, we have a number of detectives. We divide up the alphabet. You have a detective who's answering, like I mentioned, anybody who has the last name starting with A through C, and then you have a D, E, F, and G, and it on and on until everybody's responsible for a portion of those incoming calls.
So say you have an investigation that involves a name that falls within your section of the alphabet. Are you working that case alone, or do you work that case with others? How does that process work?
It depends on the case itself. If you have something not exigent, my 16-year-old daughter wanted to go to a party. I told her she couldn't. I went and checked on her and her window's open, and I think she left and went to the party. That is not going to come across as an exigent or concerning event. That child is perfectly capable of navigating her world. She has an amazing social structure. There's no known harm to that child. That's going to be a lower priority response. Everything is going to get a response. Everybody's going to get a call back to check the welfare and to see if something else has happened. But that initial triage, I'm going to be focusing on younger children. Anybody 8 and under is an automatic response for the entire unit. That's where we're going to roll out based on the age alone. That child needs to be found as soon as possible. You can also take into account Amber Alerts, a child who's been abducted, some sort of stranger interaction, removing that child from its lawful parent, its guardian. That is going to have literally a citywide response, and that will greatly be expanded by other resources. We also have a similar situation for our silver alerts, older persons who are experiencing some sort of dementia, early onset Alzheimer's, some sort of mental impairment that makes them an exigent response. There's something about them that's been diagnosed or it's been witnessed by family members that makes them more vulnerable to the environment alone. That will also have an immediate and hopefully overwhelming response.
Well, was there a missing person unit within the Family Investigations Bureau back in 2001?
Yes.
Did that, based on your knowledge of that unit, if you have any, did that change at all after you became assigned to the unit?
The unit has grown. We've responded. I mentioned Silver Alerts. Silver Alert did not exist in 2001. Any sort of specialized response would have been dictated by the detective or by the sergeant at that time, but it was not a hard and fast rule as it is today. It is not a recognized situation as it is today. For minors, you have the Amber Alert. America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response is the acronym for AMBER. It's eponymously named for a young lady named Amber Hagerman. She was an unwitnessed abduction in Texas. The child was killed. Her body was found. There was a public outpouring of the people in that community saying, why did you not share this information with us? So law enforcement, trying to be progressive, trying to get better at addressing these issues, created the Amber Alert so that we can put out information for any known or critical event to raise awareness with the public, get more eyes looking for the child.
And apologize if that was probably a bad question, but so structurally, the unit had existed prior to your involvement, and even back in 2001.
Yes.
Right. And sergeants or supervisors may come and go and change. And did that occur?
Yes, they do. Very often, in my 7-8 years there, I had more than 7 or 8 supervisors.
All right. So you talked about some of the things that you would do and how you would handle a case when it comes in. How important is the information that you receive when a case comes up in your section of the alphabet? How important is that information to help you begin determining how to proceed on that call?
It literally dictates my response. If I have a parent who comes in and says, hey, my kid ran away, please return her if she is found. That is at low priority. I'm going to ensure that she's appropriately listed in ACIC, NCIC, so that any officer that comes into contact with her knows to detain her and contact that parent. That initial information coming from your reporting party is the most critical information. It dictates the tenor of that investigation.
So if a parent or reporting party has concerns, specific concerns about something that might affect the welfare or safety of an individual that is missing, is that information that's important to be communicated as early as possible?
Absolutely. You can't withhold that content.
Once you receive a call or report of a missing person, you said there's various possibilities. There's at least some possibilities on how you will analyze that information and begin to investigate that case. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
Right. Once you receive a case that you determine requires some additional work immediately, what do you do?
Arrange with my supervisor, arrange with my other peers, get the manpower needed to address that issue.
All right. So if I make a report that my daughter has ran away, if I make a report that my mother, who I always see every day, did not come home and she's under my care, would you initially go out to either my residence or residences where that individual is known to live at or stay?
Yeah, you're going to perform the appropriate follow-up for the situation. If you're telling me you have an elderly relative and there is a obvious and perceived break in her pattern of life, that's going to get my attention. If you're telling me I have a unruly, out-of-pocket child who's on her own, she's going to be listed, but I don't have the ability nor the will to begin combing the city for a child who is disobedient to you.
You talked about receiving some information, that initial information, and putting it into a database.
Yes.
What was that database again?
It's ACIC and NCIC. Again, that's how law enforcement, whether it's city, county, state, or federal, we all communicate through that information. Think of it, if you have a warrant for your arrest, everybody in uniform knows about that. All right. We don't have a list of it, but as soon as we inquire about your name, your date of birth, your social security number, we are going to be informed of it at that point. It's going to have specific, explicit directions on what the offense is and what is to be done with you and who is to be contacted to address your arrest or detention.
Can these systems account for, I guess, entry errors?
Absolutely. You can misspell something. Let's take Alissa Turney as an example. That's Alissa Marie Turney. I can run Alissa with an I. I can run Alissa with a Y. I can run Alissa Christine Turney. I can run Alissa Tersey. I can run Alissa Turner. And I will get a response from the machine telling me this is a possible match for your missing person. This is a possible match for an arrest warrant.
And we don't need to go through the variations, but would that apply for things like hair color? If you're entering that information, is there considerations that there could be errors or things like that?
Yes, your hair color is irrelevant. You can change your hair color or you can completely lose your hair. It does not matter. Same thing with eyes. If I contact you, you have the height and weight, the general build, but your eyes are actually, in my opinion, brown instead of green. I'm still going to do additional follow-up to ensure that you're the right person or to corroborate that you're not the right person.
All right. And have you investigated during your career cases where children have ran away?
Yes, very, very often.
Right. And have you investigated cases during your career where children have been abducted and murdered?
Yes, unfortunately. The last actual Amber Alert for Phoenix occurred last night. The last one I actively worked on was Christmas Day of 2009. That was Natalie Rose Flores. She was a 5-year-old girl. She was abducted. Now, Natalie was recovered alive, but post horrible traumatic events that happened to her.
Have you investigated cases where the person reporting a runaway or a missing person was actually the one that abducted that person?
Yes, the worst one that comes to mind is the parent of Jesse Shockley. Again, another 4-year-old child. That was
We don't need to go into the actual details, but does it happen enough where you actually have a term for that?
Yes, it's called FACA, F-A-C-A. It's a false allegation of child abduction. It is any event where a parent or a responsible party contacts law enforcement out of a parent's due diligence to report somebody missing. And it ends up being part of a charade or their attempt to adjust interest away from themselves when they are in fact responsible for the disappearance or murder of that child.
Don't know if it's necessary, but you mentioned you're not a cold case detective.
That's true. I did not come to the detail and begin looking through all the old reports with time on my hand. I came to the detail. I had an active queue. Again, I work with not only Detective Summershoe, but I work with Detective, he's a sergeant. He was Sergeant Chapman when I went to the detail. He was Officer Chapman when I knew him back then. He's now Assistant Chief Chapman. But we went through the entire volume of my queue. So we made a conscious effort to deal with Vernette Wester, single mother of 5 who went missing in 1985. I made a conscious effort to go through.
Objection relevance.
Sustained. And we'll move along, Judge. So when you say, just to make sure, when you say you're, or to help us understand, when you say cold case, we don't necessarily need to get into any past experiences, but what does cold case mean?
Cold case is something that it's old, it is unresolved, and there are no active leads.
So when you say you were not given a caseload or assignment for cold cases, but you became involved in did you become involved in the Turney investigation?
I did.
How does that work?
Well, I was trying to say there are many other cases that I've been involved in since coming to the missing persons detail. I drifted towards and I focused on Alissa Turney because of her age and because of other factors I identified with the family.
All right. Did you prepare, a number of reports for this investigation?
I've lost count with how many reports. It's well over 2,000 pages of documents now.
And do you have those reports with you today?
In a digital format, yes.
So I believe that has been fine with defense, but if we need to refer to your reports, will you please let us know that you're doing so? And if necessary, we can show that to defense.
Certainly.
So how did you become involved in the Alissa Turney investigation?
Again, Alissa Turney was one of a number of unresolved investigations that fell within my responsibility, my area of responsibility, Phoenix Citizens S through Z.
And what did you initially do after becoming involved with that investigation?
The first thing you do is you pull up all the documents related to that interview. You read through it. You get yourself caught up to speed. You look for anything that's been impounded, any sort of case notation, and then you look for the person that you contact for the family. You're typically your reporting party.
At some point in this initial process, do you determine it'd be helpful to interview people?
Yes, that is when you're trying to piece together a missing person investigation, regardless of whether it's a juvenile or whether it's an adult, you have to have that pattern of life. You have to speak to the people in the home. You need to speak to people in her neighborhood. For a 17-year-old girl, you absolutely must investigate her social life. You need to know who she went to high school with at this high school. You need to know who she went to high school with at the second high school. You need to speak to her boyfriend. You need to speak to her employer and people that she worked with.
Did some of those people that you, and actually that was a poor question that I asked before. When I said at some point, did you decide you needed to interview some people? How early on did you decide you needed to interview some additional people for this investigation?
Relatively quick. Looking over the initial report, there'd been no canvas. There's no documentation as to the entire family tree. Obviously, it was reported as a runaway going to California. I don't see any supplements involving her relatives in California. That's not acceptable. That needs to be addressed. When I'm looking at that 17-year-old girl, she has to be alive somewhere and simply has not been communicated to us, or something very serious has happened to her.
Following up on that, let's say you have an initial report that comes in. Let's just use me. I report that my child has gone missing. My child is older, and maybe they're mid-teens or so. They often run away, go to a party, something like that. Is that a priority for you?
No, absolutely not. That child is going to be, she left your control against your wishes, but she went to be with her friends, her social circle, her boyfriend. If you're not hearing from those friends, she's more than likely perfectly fine.
If my child has not come back and now it's the next day, does that increase your level of concern at that point?
There's always going to be an incremental increase, but one day is not significant. And specifically, if you're talking about somebody who left on her last day of school, who has friends that are graduating or have friends that are going to be celebrating their emancipation from school, I'm going to give her a wide breadth of time before she comes back.
And if I now report that it's been a year since I have seen my child, does that change things?
Yes. In my opinion, as soon as that child approaches 18, whatever issue, known or unknown, that has driven her away from the home, if she's gone to the length that she's not recontacted any relatives, but now she's 18 and she's an adult, I have certain obligations to change her profile. As a missing juvenile, you're, for lack of a better description, your property. I'm going to detain you. I'm going to contact your parent and I'm going to arrange for you to go home. I'm also going to pull you aside and see if there's anything that drove you away from the home. That's where that AFIT training comes in. I'm going to see if there's a purpose for you to run. All right, a significant purpose, not just not getting along with mom and dad. When you become 18, that changes. I check your welfare. I document who you're with, what vehicle you're in, what you're doing. I obtain information about what you're doing in life so that I can see that you are successful and not encumbered and not under somebody else's sway. But I do not report that information to your reporting party. They get a courtesy call saying, we found this person, they're alive and well. They were advised that they had been listed as a missing person. We're closing your case.
All right, so is the passage of time data, for lack of a better word, that the missing person unit utilizes in determining the exigency of the investigation it needs to do?
Absolutely. You being missing for an hour is not concerning. 6 hours is not concerning. 24 hours is not concerning. As you're talking about older persons, 17, 18, 19, 20, without some sort of exigent event, you're not a concern. I'm not going to comb the world looking for you. There's no exigency there. As time marches on, as you miss birthdays and holidays without recontacting your loved ones, without returning to that recognized pattern of life, that introduces exigency.
What does it do to the exigency level if a reporting party informs the missing person unit that after the individual has ran away, they've had some kind of contact with that person?
You have put out whatever fire was present. You have told me this person reached out to me. They have the means, the ability to contact me. You have told me that that person is alive and well, and they are simply out of your control and not willing to return to you.
All right, we talked about some interviews that you decided that needed to be done. You are the case agent, so you have been sitting, you're able to sit through the trial. You've seen some of the people who have testified. However, did you interview family members who have not testified at trial?
Yes.
Did you interview neighbors and friends who have not testified at trial?
Absolutely.
Do you have, this may be a difficult question, but do you have the ability to recall how many interviews you did for this case?
I would give you the total numbers is approaching 200 individuals who went to whose information was enough, specific enough, important enough that they were documented. Beyond that, through the neighborhood canvases alone, you can add another 100 people to it.
I apologize. I don't want to use up any court time, but I wasn't sure that Detective Summershoe was asked what a canvas is. What is a canvas that you're talking about of a neighborhood?
A canvas. Where you live is important to me. That's the people immediately around you. I'm concerned about sex offenders. I'm concerned about your neighbor next door. I'm concerned about that 20-year-old boy who lives across the street, whether you know him or not. Performing the neighborhood canvas gives me intelligence. It gives me an aspect of your identity. It shows me what's immediately around you. Specifically for Alissa, I know that with 8 years having passed, if she had any peers in that neighborhood, they've likely moved on. They've gone to college, they've gotten jobs, they've moved out, they started families on their own, but their parents may be there still. So I'm trying to determine people that may have known her, may have seen her, may have some intelligence about her.
Well, what physically occurs during a canvas? How does that occur? Is this electronic, a courtesy call? How you doing? Is there more than that?
Old school, door to door, knocking on your door, introducing myself, showing you a flyer and asking you a preset number of questions. Did you live here in 2001? Do you recognize this child? Do you know the family that lives at this address? Did you know them when they lived at this address? Do you have anybody in your family that's within her age range? Again, I'm looking to get as complete a picture of who she was and who she interacted with.
Out of curiosity, do you tend to get more responses when you are dealing with individuals face to face or through like electronic means?
Electronic means is the most common way to reach out to somebody. It's easy for me to contact you, tell you who I am, solicit some sort of information from you. But again, I'm always going to want to see you face to face. I'm going to want to look in your eyes. I'm going to want to evaluate your responses to me. My job isn't just writing down what you say. I've got to believe it. I've got to see if there's something that doesn't make sense. Are you telling me something that you could not have possibly witnessed? Is it something that you heard somewhere else? Is it a story that you're simply passing off as your own, or did you know this child?
All right, so we talked about a canvas, and you noted that that it's possible after the passage of time for people to have left the area. Was that correct?
That is correct.
Are you able to account for people leaving the area if the need arises to follow up with those individuals?
Certainly, TransUnion, Accurant, there are a number of resources available to law enforcement, even up above and beyond our records management system, where I can inquire your address, I can inquire partial names, I can inquire your social security number, your date of birth. I can go through the postal inspector, and the postal inspector keeps very articulate records of who lived here, between what dates, what persons received mail there, whether they're on a lease or not. There's a wealth of information out there. There's actually a number of cottage industries that function solely to provide law enforcement with information.
All right, when you are searching for an individual, do you consider medical possibilities that have afflicted them and caused the problem?
Yes. I mean, the most obvious ones are the people that are infirm. There's some sort of medication needed, or they have a condition where if they do not have appropriate protection from the weather, or if they do not have medication, they are going to fail to thrive, possibly endanger their lives. That's critical information.
So if I'm walking out in the heat today, it's 110 degrees out, I faint, pass out, I'm unconscious, maybe even in a coma, am I a person that could still be located?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you, Detective Summershoe talked a little bit about what the process is like if a body is identified in a location and trying to make a comparison. I guess my question for you is that only a local situation, or is there a national ability to do that?
Yes, the proper title for my time in the missing persons unit is missing and unidentified persons. There's two sides to that coin. We have people that go missing. We have human remains that are found in whatever condition, whether it's a recent decomp, whether it's a recent person who has died. I've evaluated people who are being kept alive on ventilators, but were functionally brain dead. My job is both of those aspects. It's identifying the unidentified person, identifying the human remains, and making the connection to where they're missing. For any unidentified human remains, it's assumed that there's a missing persons report out there. We simply need to obtain the biographical information to knit those two together.
I believe they note, Detective Summershoe noted DNA.
Yes, CODIS.
And was DNA collected in this case to use to identify a body if you ever found Alissa Turney?
Yes, the initial collection was done before my time. It was done by those investigators in the past. That they contacted Sarah Turney and John Turney. They are both biologically related to Alissa. It's a maternal, so it's the mitochondrial DNA. Once I got there, we reached out to her biological father, Stephen Strom. He was kind enough to come to Arizona, speak to us, and provided his DNA samples so that we have both portions of Alissa, the mitochondrial and the Y-star DNA. That fleshes out a very strong identifiable pattern for CODIS entry and for University of North Texas databases.
If you're not fortunate enough to be able to have a DNA source for an individual, are there still methods for you to identify a body?
Absolutely. The strongest method outside of DNA is going to be your dentition. It's going to be your teeth. Teeth are as independent or as individual as your fingerprints, especially if you've had any sort of work done. Dentists are meticulous in identifying where they have put fillings into your teeth, what surface they're on. X-rays can be laid over the top of the X-rays of human remains again, and you can make very strong comparisons and matches to that. I've used dental records to match a number of unidentified human remains to missing persons.
Thank you. Your Honor, is this a good point to break for the morning?
Sure, ladies and gentlemen, we're right at our lunch hour. I'll ask you to be back in the jury room at 1:30. You can leave everything in the courtroom if you'd like. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. Jury is now excused. Please be seated. Sure. Let the record reflect the presence of counsel and the defendant. The jury is not present. Anything for the record from the state? Anything for the record from the defense? All right. We did get 4 juror questions during that session, which I've numbered as 3, 4, 5, and 6, and will file with the clerk. Question 3, there were no objections by either party, and the court read the questions in their entirety. Question 4, neither side had any objection. The court read the question in its entirety. Question 5, neither side had any objection, and the court read the question in its entirety. Question 6 had multiple questions that the parties agreed would best be asked of Detective Anderson rather than Detective Summershoe. Is there anything the state wanted to add to the record regarding the juror questions? Anything the defense wanted to add to the record?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we are adjourned. We'll see you at 1:30.
fucking people that they just want to, but you just watch by a big mouth, which leaves me no alternatives to any of all this bullshit, Mike. And I'm exhausted. I don't want to be involved in this kind of shit. This is forcing me to live like my fucking.
Working, just leave it where it is.
But I would say, can you please put up the thing where it shows it at least instead of things that say Turney in the background?
Sure.
Just put up the.
Yep.
Before we bring the jury in.
Oh, Judge, I had a, I guess that's fine. I think
We're off the record.
that's fine. I think
Please be seated. We are back on the record in State versus Turney. Let the record show the presence of counsel, the defendant, and the jury. Detective Anderson is back on the witness stand. Mr. Bailey, you may resume your direct examination of the witness whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. I believe we left off where you were discussing various ways to identify a body where you do not have DNA to utilize. To be clear, if you have DNA, do you still utilize those other methods if possible?
Absolutely. Any approachable avenue for identification, depending on the timing when we recover the body. And when I say body, sometimes it's a full body, sometimes it's a partial body, sometimes it is skeletal remains. We've identified people based on partial skull cap recoveries. If I have a full body, we do scars, marks, tattoos. We've done medical implants for people that have pacemakers. We've identified two persons who died in a plane crash based on breast augmentations that survived the crash and a wrist augmentation, metal grafting to hold together bones of the wrist.
All right. So Detective Summershoe, I believe, noted that there was some searches that were completed at residences where the defendant was living.
Yes, her address at the time that she was identified as a missing person, missing juvenile, runaway juvenile, was 17217 North 34th Street, roughly 34th Street in Bell.
And where were they living when you did the search of the residence?
Directly across the street, 17218 North 34th Street.
Okay. During that search, did you recover audio tapes?
Yes, a number of audio tapes in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 tapes.
Right. Exhibit number 37, Judge.
You may.
Can you tell us what we are looking at in exhibit number?
Specifically, this has an impound date of 12/12 of 2008. The DR number, departmental report number 2001-109-22334. That's for this incident. The invoice number, which is also matched to a barcode, 3754832-0425, originally identified as item 425. The item number, when we perform a search of a home, we divide the home into different sections. The master bedroom will be 100, another bedroom will be 200, living room will be 300, garage will be 400, and so forth. That way we can always tell where that item came from. So this is the 25th item from room 400. The final piece of information is my name, my signature, and my serial number, 7232. The description as entered is 19 audio cassette tapes found bottom drawer of, and then it cuts off because we don't have the space for more information.
Right. I wasn't intending to get into that here, but that's a good piece of information. How do you ensure that the evidence that Phoenix PD collects at any scene, not just the search that we're doing here, but any scene, is the evidence that you impound and can determine that later?
It requires diligence. We'll assign a single officer for oversight of the home. That person is responsible for bagging and tagging items as they're identified. Beyond that, we also have crime scene technicians that take overall scene photographs to show entry, the condition of the location at the time we enter. They do their best to take pictures of items of interest as they're found. With as many people as we have inside this home at the time, obviously they're not going to get to every individual item. And finally, you have the impound officer, the person whose signature is on here, is responsible for sealing this item. In addition to the seal, it'll also have my name and my initials and my serial number, marking that it's a enclosed document, has not been molested by anybody else. From that, we have a property custodian that removes the items, takes them down to our property annex. For this particular investigation, Detective Summershoe and myself committed, I believe, 2 weeks to cataloging and itemizing and entering all of this into our system.
So you said that there's unique identifiers. Is that an actual number that's a unique number assigned for that item number, for that, sorry, that piece of evidence?
Yes, for this package, it has that one barcode number that I read to you, and I won't bother you with again. There are other things to notice. This is a large volume of content. This is 19 audio tapes. If during the review of those items, if I found something that was of unique value, unique importance, something that I wanted to identify on its own, I would remove it from this package, create a new invoice number that would be something akin of 425A. If I found a second item, it'd be 425B, 425C, and so on, so that we can always reassociate that to the parent to the room where we physically recovered the item.
And so you sub-itemize individual pieces of evidence if you believe it has some value.
Yes.
And can you utilize that barcode to also track that piece of evidence as well?
Yes, property custodians can tell you where it is at any one time.
Right. You said those are a number of audio cassette tapes.
Yes.
Do you recall how many audio cassette tapes you recovered during your searches of the residence?
Again, based upon the entire volume, I cannot tell you it's exactly 432. It is somewhere between 400 to 500 items.
And did the Phoenix Police Department, you and other officers, assistants with the officers, review all of those audio cassettes?
Every audio cassette, every micro cassette, every 3x5 floppy disk drive, if you remember those, VHS tapes, we developed all the film, everything we could.
Since you were not able to ascertain how many cassettes, other than maybe 400 to 500, you said?
Yes, that's a rough estimate. I've never spent the time to go in and individually itemize them to get the exact total. There's a possibility for redundancy. There are 19 in this package, so I would read 19 items impounded, but then a supplement later on is going to be based on one of the items I pulled out of there, so I run the risk of recounting that and inflating the number.
So I suspect you could not give an estimate or amount of hours that were actually reviewed?
The tapes are typically 60 to 90 minutes. If it were a straightforward playthrough one time, it would be 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the tape. That is not practical for anything that has any sort of communication, especially for the call records that we have, the incoming and outgoing calls to the home. That greatly slows down your process. And it also complicates the matter. And Detective Summershoe and myself are familiar enough with the persons inside this home that we can make reasonable assumptions as to who's speaking. Civilian volunteers, other detectives, one step removed from the investigation, do not have that luxury. So they would review a tape. If there was some concerning statement or something they thought was valuable, they would provide it to us and we would again listen to it.
Okay. So just to be clear, every audio cassette tape was reviewed by someone at Phoenix Police Department?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
You may.
May I approach the
You may.
witness? 32?
You may.
And your exhibit number 32, can you tell us what this item is?
Again, this has an impound date of 9/25 of 2008, so it is prior to the service of the search warrant to the residences. It's again for the same incident, 2001, 109, 22334. This is a unique item, so it is impounded as item number 1. It's the lone item on this particular invoice. Again, my name is present, my serial number is present. It was assigned the unique barcode of 3755695, item 0001. It's described as a VHS tape, which is labeled 5/6 of 2001, Alissa and John. Within the package is a Scotch brand video cassette sleeve. Inside is a TDK marked videotape that has a white affixed label with black lettering that reads 5/6 of 2001, Alissa and John Lackman, or possibly Lackmar.
And I forgot, do you want me to ask each time, Judge?
No, as long as you've done it once with each witness, you don't have to ask again.
I'm approaching the witness with exhibit number 123. Detective, can you tell us what that is?
Yes, this is an image of the very same video cassette outside of the packaging.
All right. And Judge, at this time, the state would move to admit exhibit number 123 only.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 123 is admitted.
We're going to circle back around to this in a moment. And permission to publish now.
You may.
My fault, I caught Angela off guard. All right, so what are we looking at in this first photo?
That is a top-down view of that VHS cassette. That's
Alright.
the sleeve encompassing the VHS.
All right, and then the second photo, what do we see here?
That is the side view of the cassette within the sleeve. That is the label that's been affixed to it.
Great. For I guess I need to ask this question. I didn't think I would, but what is a VHS cassette tape?
Back in the good old days, before digital media, you would have to record items onto an actual taped version. I don't even know if I have the technical acumen to explain it. It's a recording device. It holds media.
All right. So essentially, like a CD or something, you would put this in a VHS player and it would play.
Yes, it plays in one direction. It unspools like a cassette tape.
And do you know approximately how many hours of footage one of these contains? Or I guess a better question is, did you review a number of these VHS tapes from the defendant's residence?
I did. The unique thing about VHS tapes is you can purchase commercial VHS tapes that have your favorite movie, whatever you like, and you can alter the tape in such a way that you can record over the top of it. Given that scenario, I was compelled, I thought it was justified to take all of the VHS content that I came across, whether it was commercially marked or not, for the possibility that it could contain additional content.
All right. And can you tell us approximately how many VHS tapes you recovered?
Again, near 500.
And to be clear, we're talking about the residence at 17218 34th Street?
All items that were impounded from the search warrant were from the 17218, where the family being Sarah and Michael Roy Turney, was currently living. It is not a location where Alissa had lived. It is simply where the family had relocated to.
And was that because there was someone else living at 17217?
Yes, there were renters at 17217 North 34th Street that were kind enough to vacate the residence and let us dismantle it.
Never. So you were able to go over there and at least do some search of that house?
Yes, interior, exterior. Again, it was photographed, as is our custom. That scene was also perceived as a potential crime scene. So our command staff brought in our homicide unit to process that one specifically. The luminol process was used. We did have cadaver dogs. They were deployed on both residences.
So we said there was approximately, again, 500 VHS tapes recovered. There's approximately 500 VHS tapes recovered.
Yes, and again, I've not expended the time to get a precise recording. I just ensured that every single package was touched by a detective or one of our volunteer staff to ensure that nothing was left behind or forgotten or overlooked.
And do you know how many hours approximately were on the tapes, approximately, that you reviewed, starting with individual tape?
Individual tapes are typically 2-hour run lengths. There are some that can be extended out to 8-hour lengths. Those were very rare. So I'd say on average 2.5, 3 hours per tape. Do the math on that, 1,500.
So we're looking at approximately, at the max, the time could be 8 hours.
Yes, and admittedly on those tapes, it was permissible. I encouraged people to run them at a higher speed. Just if you're looking at Planet of the Apes, you don't need to watch it frame by frame. You can watch that at 2 times the speed to get through it.
All right. So all tapes, whether they appeared commercial or otherwise, were reviewed as well?
All tapes that were commercial in appearance, all tapes that were identified as family videos, and all tapes that were unmarked.
And I guess I should be more precise when I say all tapes. I'm specifically referring to VHS tapes at this time.
VHS tapes. We also recovered smaller cassette tapes, 8mm tapes, and there was actually some spool film as well.
So anything that could potentially store media, audio, video, was reviewed?
Yes, that was one of the primary concerns established in the search warrant, was the recovery of security camera footage and recovery of audio cassette tapes that were used to record incoming and outgoing phone calls.
I'm approaching the witness with exhibits number 31, 32, and 122. You already spoke about exhibit number 32, and what it was, but could you provide us, would you let us know if it has a label affixed to it?
It does have a label affixed to it. You're talking about specifically the VHS tape, the white label with the black lettering, 5601, Alissa and John Lackman?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And you have, I'm handing you exhibit number 31. Can you tell us what that is?
This is another VHS tape. This one is not in the sleeve. The impound notation on this is 12/12 of 2008. That was the second day of the search warrant for these 2 locations. Again, the DR number remains the same. It always will. This is identified as item 429, suggesting that it was recovered from 400, whichever room that was. My personal signature and serial number, my badge number is on it. This is identified as item 3754832, number 0429. The description on this one is Alissa John 5/6 of 2001, found in DVD VHS storage unit.
Right. And I'm going to reapproach with exhibits number 122 and 123. Exhibit number 123 has already been omitted. And can you tell us what exhibit number 122 is?
122 is photographs taken by our crime scene technician on the scene of this very VHS tape.
All right. So when you say of this very VHS tape, what exhibit item are you referring to?
I'm referring to exhibit item 31.
And I'm going to hand you exhibit number 123. Does
Yes.
that exhibit correspond with the other video cassette that you have?
Yes, exhibit 123 is the exterior VHS photo with the sleeve. The side-on one showing the 5/6 of 01 Alissa John Lackman, and that matches this Scotch marked VHS sleeve, which is identified as item number 32.
All right. Your Honor, the state would move to admit exhibit number 122 at this time.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 122 is admitted.
And permission to publish?
You may.
123, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you. So I'm turning back to exhibit number 123.
That is the one that was recovered on 9/28 of 08.
All right. And this is the labeling that was affixed to it.
That is correct. 5/6 of 2001, Alissa and John Lackman.
All right. When you can you verify the accuracy of that information on there?
No,
The date that's been affixed, that has been placed on that. Is there a mechanism on the VHS that allows you to correspond those two dates?
no, there's no recording. There's no time stamp or date stamp affixed to any of the VHS tapes.
So could I put trip to Florida and it could be something completely different on it?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm turning to exhibit number 122. Since we have not seen one of these before, what is this yellow piece of plastic that's in the upper left corner?
That is an item marker. It's used by the crime scene technicians to orient the direction and give you an estimate of the size of an object.
And in case you have not said this already, when you went to this residence to do a search of the premises, do you have individuals that are there to assist you during that search?
I do.
And are one of those individuals, their job title, a crime scene technician?
Crime scene response specialist, crime scene technician, yes.
What is their role in the investigation?
Overall documentation. As I mentioned, they take photographs of everything, digital photographs showing the layout, the condition of the home before detectives enter. You'll have special assignments unit, SWAT officers that will ensure that the home is not occupied and that it is safe for them to enter. At that point, the first person on scene is going to be that crime scene technician documenting the condition of the home as police arrived. It's done for obvious documentation purposes. It's also done to prevent us from being accused of damaging items.
All right, and turning to the second page on exhibit number 122, zoom in, what do we see here?
What I see is 5/16 of 01, Alissa John, which is slightly different than how it was impounded.
All right, so when you say 5/16, are you referring to this portion of the date right here?
Yes.
And is there something that appears to be on in that area?
I'm sorry, I did not understand that, Mr. Bailey.
Probably a poor question. Did it appear that there was potentially some kind of substance on that, such as whiteout?
Yes, it very much appears that it's been written onto multiple times. It has been written over multiple times. There may appear to be a whiteout or some similar substance applied, and then another date attached to the top of it.
All right. So was this tape? Did it have the was there a duplicate incident where of the Alissa and John Lackman dispute fight?
There's a duplicate of that captured incident. Yes.
All right. And were you provided with a copy prior to the search?
Yes, that's the 9/28/08, the item that's in the sleeve.
So turning back to exhibit number 123, was this the item that was provided to you prior to the search?
Yes.
And that was reviewed
Yes, it was.
prior to the search?
Yes.
And then this was a second copy of that was obtained during the search?
Yes, the second copy was found inside the home during the search. 17218. North 34th Street.
Did you, we've talked a little bit about the defendant. Did you take a photograph of the defendant back closer in time when you did the search?
Yes, on December 11th of 2008, he was photographed, full body photograph, close-ups to the torso, face.
So as we all do, physical changes occur. I'm going to approach with exhibit number 120. Okay. No objection. Okay. Judge, I believe this can be omitted without approaching the witness.
All right, you're offering exhibit number
120, Your Honor, to be omitted and published.
and any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 120 may be admitted and published.
All right. Who are we looking at in this photo?
That is Michael Roy Turney, identified as the defendant. That was back in December of 2008.
All right. Approximately what was his build?
According to his MVD and my in-person contact with him, approximately 5'8" to 5'9", 210 pounds.
Okay. And was he able to get around easily back in that time?
Yes, he was unimpaired.
I apologize. Based on your observations.
Based upon my observation, yes.
Now, did you and Detective Summershoe go to the defendant's residence on September 12th, 2008, in the anticipation of retrieving a number of items that had belonged to Alissa?
Yes, in my initial contact with a family representative who was 19-year-old Sarah Turney at the time, I expressed an interest in collecting any sort of items, artifacts, anything that would have been personal of Alissa's, to try and identify friends, a notebook, a journal, her yearbook, items like that, personal correspondence, anything we could, anything that remained of her in their possession. We agreed upon that date, anticipating a significant volume of content. I brought Detective Summershoe, myself, Detective Linda Bruja, and I arranged for a F-150 truck for removal of any sort of property.
How many items were you actually able to obtain when you went there?
Very little. I think we left with her yearbook.
And I guess how many items were the items prepackaged or bundled to your arrival?
They were encased in a couple of small totes. A lot of the things had no real value to me. Her stuffed animals, stuff like that. I can't really do anything with that. I'm trying to remember the exact items there. There were a number of items that we looked through. I don't remember anything significant that I took that day.
That's fine. So there was a small couple of Tupperware or container devices that had those items?
Small containers, yes.
Did they also contain items that had belonged to Sarah?
Yeah, they were mixed. We would go through, we would express an interest in an item, and Sarah would identify it as hers.
When you were provided with these items, were you given access to the entire house?
No, we were kept, and we respectfully remained in the entryway to the home. Again, this is 17218. Alyssa's never lived there. I don't really have an interest in going throughout the home. Officer safety, I don't like people leaving my site and then returning into my site, but I felt comfortable. It was a family contact. It wasn't an aggressive environment.
And that was done via invitation from Sarah Turney?
Yeah, well, I'm sure I suggested it. I wanted to obtain whatever I could to flesh out who Alissa had been.
Poor question. It was something that was agreed upon between you and Sarah Turney?
Yes.
All right. And just to be clear, there was no, during that time or your search of the residence, you never recovered a cassette tape of a call that the defendant had stated was Alissa calling from California?
No.
And you never came across, or you're never provided with a video cassette of the day, May 17, 2001, when Alissa disappeared?
No, I've never been provided with that item, and that is something that we knew absolutely existed.
Well, how did you know it existed?
In review of the case documents, the items that had been impounded by prior case agents, there is a letter dated May 25th of 2001 from Michael Roy Turney to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. NCMEC is one of the resources that we suggest two persons who are going through a missing loved one, specifically children. Persons in that 18, 19, 20-year-old category are also handled by NCMEC. But they provide advice, they can provide counseling. They also organize media outreach. If you've ever seen a child on a milk milk carton, that's NCMEC. If you've ever seen a bulletin board put up advertising missing child, if you've ever seen images of a missing child at Walmart, that is NCMEC.
All right. When you were at the residence on September 12th, 2008, did you speak to the defendant?
Yes, Mr. Turney was there along with Sarah.
Okay. And did the defendant provide you with a description of Alissa Turney?
Yes, the vague description, the physical description of her clothing was not discussed or recalled in any usable fashion.
Right. Do you recall him speaking about whether she had any behavioral problems?
Yes, a lot of that is volunteered information.
Right. Well, did the defendant say that Alissa was not a behavioral problem? She just flunked all her
All of
tests.
her tests.
That is what ADDs are like.
Yes.
Did he also describe Alissa as Alissa has a mental illness, a disability?
Yes.
During that conversation, did the defendant tell you when he picked Alissa up from school that day?
Again, the statements recalled by Mr. Turney at that time were vague. It was, I'm not really sure. It's been a while. You have to excuse me. I'm not in good health. I did not get concrete answers. There was enough of a willingness on Mr. Turney's part to discuss the situation that I invited him to come down for an interview.
When you asked him when he picked up Alissa, was his response right at the end of school?
Yeah, but again, that's already been established as inaccurate. So I don't know that he's fully thinking through.
I'm just asking what the statement that he made.
Yes, that was the statement.
And then did you ask him about more details and his memory of May 17, 2001?
Yes, the May 17th, 2001 is a glaring hole. There's no ability for me to set up a timeline. There's nothing to corroborate who had seen her last. There's nothing to corroborate her return.
Could I hear the question again?
I said, did you also ask him about his memory of May 17, 2001?
I did.
Okay. And did he state at that time that he went to get Alissa early from school?
Yes.
Did he remark on when he returned home later that night?
I believe it was a vague remark, something to the extent of after dark. Or it may have been dark.
Did the defendant volunteer any statements about Alissa and taking money with her?
Yes, I believe he did. If there's something I quoted, may I refer to the report? Instead of
Certainly.
trying to recover my 20 years of memory.
Certainly. We're looking at supplement 251.
251.
251. Let us know when you're on that supplement.
Just a moment. It is a 2,000 and some page PDF, larger than War and Peace. Supplement 251.
Correct. Page 8.
Top paragraph, memory of May 17th, 2001.
And we're looking at the second paragraph to the bottom. Did you, was there a comment about how much money she had with her?
And Michael Roy Turney was asked about Alyssa's income and how she cashed her paycheck check from Jack in the Box. The original report had indicated that Alissa.
Actually, it's fine if you do that, but I suspect we will. The rules will expect us to only omit some statements that he made. So did
Absolutely.
he?
I will correct that. My understanding was that she took $300. That was expressed to us in the notes. Speaking to Mr. Turney, he indicated that she had taken close to $1,200.
All right. Did you noted neighborhood canvas that was done?
Yes, the 18th of that same month.
So would that be approximately 6 days, 7 days later?
Yes.
And that involved the task that you've already explained this morning?
Yes, the old school shoe leather, knocking on doors, showing people bulletins. If there's no answer at the door, you leave the bulletin and a business card there to solicit a response. If somebody was there, you ask them how long they've been in the neighborhood, if they were aware of the situation, if they knew this child, or if they had any children or cousins or anybody who would have been within her age range. I'm looking for peers, friends in the neighborhood.
All right. Did the defendant during that encounter volunteer to you any information about him surveilling Alissa at work?
Yes, Mr. Turney stated that he had watched her from the parking lot.
Did he have any concern about doing that?
I don't believe so. I think he felt that that was justified.
Probably a poor question. Was he worried that he may have been caught?
Yes, that she had noticed.
Your Honor, may I approach with exhibit number 104?
You may.
Sorry, have it. Can you take a look at exhibit number 104 and tell us what we're looking at?
Yes, this is a Desert Schools Federal Credit Union account statement in the name of Alissa M. Turney from 17217 North 34th Street. It has her account number, and the date range is 4/26 of 2001 to July 25th of 2001.
All right. Did you obtain a larger volume of bank records?
Yes,
And this is just a portion of what you obtained?
yes, it is.
How are bank records, how can bank records be of value to you in an investigation in general?
In general, if somebody has access to money, people tend to access their money, especially if they're living off the grid. If they're financing themselves without the help of a parent or a significant other, they're going to seek out the resources that they have at hand.
All right. So are bank records or financial records a potential investigative lead for you?
Absolutely. I've identified missing adults through bank records. We'll have images of them approaching ATMs in different states.
All right. You're I'm getting old, Your Honor. I've already forgot the exhibit.
104.
104. Your Honor, the state would move to admit exhibit number 104 at this time.
No objection.
Exhibit 104 is admitted.
And permission to publish.
You may.
All right. We will see if this is large enough for everyone to see. But what are we looking at here?
Well, you've zoomed in on the top page of that statement, that same date range of April to July
All right.
2001.
So, just to go a little bit slowly, when we're talking about date range, are we looking at this portion where I have my pen?
If you look up the top just off of the screen, it will give you the precise date range.
I apologize. I'm on a roll with questions today. Are these numbers right here dates for certain transactions?
Yes, documented transactions having occurred on that date.
And what you referenced, which is on above the screen, this is the records that were pulled that we're seeing here for the date range we're seeing here.
Yes, the second page will be the continuation from July through October.
All right. So when we're looking at this, was there anything of note for you during your investigation?
Initially, the 4/26 of 2001 date, there's a transfer of shares, which is transfer of cash equivalency from the account 529480-08 in the amount of $300.
All right. Well, what else was a value to you in this document?
On the second page, thank you. There's the termination of the account. $1,860, which had been in that account, is removed from the account and moved into a different account.
All right. One moment, Your Honor. So we've heard some testimony about $300. Do you know where that $300 came from? That's on, excuse me, April 26, 2001.
Yes, that $300 originated from the personal account of Michael Roy Turney, was deposited into his daughter's account, Alissa Marie Turney.
Okay, and how are you able to determine that?
In addition to Alyssa's bank statements, we also recovered statements from Michael Roy Turney as well as Sarah Turney.
All right. Yes. Turning some other documents. I'm not sure this was, I don't think this was admitted yesterday. 68. Contract. Sign contract. The actual signed one. Okay. I'm going to approach with exhibit number.
You don't have,
I'm sorry.
no objection to it if you're offering to admit it.
Okay. Your Honor, I believe defense will stipulate to omission and publication of exhibit number 68.
Any objection?
Objection, Your Honor.
68 will be admitted and published.
All right. What are we looking at in this document, Detective?
This is one of the several contracts, legalized documents, often notarized and signed between Alissa Marie Turney as instructed by her father, Michael Roy Turney.
And how did you obtain this document?
Some of these documents were actually sent to us from Michael Roy Turney.
And in this document, was there anything of value to you?
I consider the documents to be oddities. I've never encountered anything like this before, not even in domestic violence. My specific concerns were the
Objection, hearsay, calls for speculation.
Sustained as to improper opinion. Why don't you re-ask the question?
That's fine, Judge. If we can just,
Strike his response, Your Honor.
Sustained. The jury will disregard the answer.
when you review this document, were there specific terms that caught your attention?
Yes.
All right. And which one of those terms, if or all of them, were concerning to you?
Sexual abuse, sexual intercourse, bisexual activities, oral sex.
And who, I guess, to be clear, you just noted off those areas. The full statement, though, is I have never engaged in, for example, number 5, any sexual intercourse.
That is correct.
Right. And I have never seen my father sexually or physically abuse my sister, Sarah Turney.
That is correct.
I have never seen my father, Mike Turney, physically or sexually abuse any of his children.
Correct.
So you came across a number of these terms. Is there a date on this document?
Yes, if you move it to the bottom. Well, there's a date, May 19th of 2000 on the top. If you go to the bottom, May 19th of 2000 is when Alissa Turney appears to have signed it.
Did you come across notarized documents, contracts?
Yes, at least 3 of them. I'm sorry, 2 notarized and signed, at least, I'm sorry, 2 signed, 1 also notarized and signed.
What is a notarized document?
A notarized document is a a document that you took, sat down in front of a notary public who registered the document, stamped it as you identified yourself, and signed it in her presence.
All right. So
His presence, her presence.
is it an extra layer of authentication for the time that's being this is being signed?
Yes, it marks it in stone, for lack of a better description.
And was this document notarized?
I do not believe this one was notarized. I do not see the notary stamp on this one.
All right. So the only information we have from this document is May 19th, 2000.
Yes.
There's a second document in that. Do you know if that second document is a additional copy of this without signatures on it?
Yes, there appears to be a rough copy without any sort of penmanship on it, just the printed version.
All right. Moving on. Judge, I believe by stipulation or without objection, Exhibit 110 was omitted yesterday. Exhibit number 121 is an identical copy of 110 with the addition of a signature or initials on it. So the state would be moving to omit exhibit number 121 at this time.
Any objection?
Objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 121 will be admitted.
All right, so Detective, I believe we saw exhibit number 110 yesterday, and it was a contract, and we went over those terms.
I don't know that it was displayed earlier, but it was shown to Detective Summershoe.
Right, it was omitted, so we will just move on to exhibit number 121. Is this an identical copy to that exhibit number 110?
With the exception of this one is actually marked. It has the signature and the initials.
Okay, so when you say this one is marked, are we seeing initials on this side of the contract?
Yes, AT next to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And is this a contract between, who is this contract between?
It's identified as a parental, custodian, and child agreement. The parental portion being Michael Roy Turney, custodian being his youngest son, Michael Seth Turney, and the child being Alissa Marie Turney.
Okay. And again, do we have a number of terms listed here?
Yes, on that page and the next.
All right. And when you say on the next, this is a 2-page document.
Yes, it is.
What do we see on this page?
This page has the date at which it was signed and the notary. Is that me or you?
Hit that AF button, autofocus on the top.
Let's see.
Thought I was having a stroke.
Apologize, Your Honor.
Somewhere around there.
What's that?
There we go.
There we go.
If you can bring it to the bottom, that's the.
Okay, so just to, before we jump to that, we see some more terms with initials next to them.
Yes, items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 are visible, each appearing to have the AT initials.
All right. And at the bottom of this page,
Signed this 23rd day of May 2000. Alissa Turney has remarked they have no identification. Michael Roy Turney signature is there. Michael Seth Turney signature is there. And the notary public whose commission expires 4/25 of 2001. I cannot read her name on this copy. She's acknowledging that it was signed on May 23rd of 2000.
all right, to be clear, we have a date that her commission expired, but this is
Yes.
the date that this individual is notarizing this document was
That-
certified.
That is correct. She's acknowledging that this document was documented by her as a notary public on May 23rd of 2000.
Before I switch over to Elmo and we make that transition, I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. This money, the funds here, do you know where those funds went to? The $1,860.
Yes, on October 5th of 2001, this account was effectively closed, $1,860. The majority of the balance was transferred from the account of Alissa Marie Turney into that of her sister, Sarah Elizabeth Turney.
And we're going to transfer over now. Oh, yeah. Yes. Great. Are you familiar with a call from the defendant talking to one of his sons, Michael Seth Turney?
Yes.
And did you have a chance to review that call?
I've listened to it a few times in the past, yes.
All right. I'm going to approach you with exhibit, or Judge, I believe without objection, the state's going to move to omit exhibit number 124 and publish.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 124 is admitted and may be published.
Code 602 in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you. Hello. Yep. Count it all and write it on the envelope. I have an envelope. Fun. I call it a bad time. Any day today's a bad day. Sarah don't want to go to school. Alyssa's supposed to go in late. She lost her wallet. You know, I'm giving her basically an alternative cops where she can bond back with me and the family and stop being such a fucking asshole and, you know, distance this family from all the problems we've had from her boyfriend. And she said no. On the 28th, a bad day. I wanted to get over and go do some fishing, just get the fuck away. But no, Sarah couldn't go to sleep last night because I was upset. I made a fully stupid mistake and tried to talk to Alissa, which was a total absolute fucking waste. You know? So for the first time in my fucking life, I've got to take a kid that I love and call the cops. Probably going to lose the house. Everything else is going to be fucked over because some stupid ass fucking bitch. More than likely, she's going to run away anyway after she gets busted. They're not going to put her in jail this time, I almost guarantee it. No, they're going to fine me $750 to $1,000. And what do I do, Mike? I don't know, Bob. I mean, this is one of those situations where I've got to live by what you guys have for rules and shit, Mike. I'm nothing like any of you guys, Mike. I'm a very boring motherfucker. I really am the most boring son of a bitch you guys have ever known. That likes to come home, play a little catch with the kids, watch a little bit of TV once in a while, hear the problems the kids had, help them with their homework, do whatever it wants to do, have a dinner, you know, sit and socialize, go off and talk with an adult at night times when we all go off to bed. That's the kind of life I like, Mike. It's a boring motherfucker, but I love it. Well, that's pretty boring, too. So the thing, it seems that you're going to be punishing yourself for something less than done. Also, just wait till the next time she does it. I mean, she's only the fifth fucking time, Mike. I mean, you know a lot better than her. They're going to do shit to her. All you're going to do is they're going to punish you. That's it. They're going to make you more pissed off. I'm just saying, dude, you know, I got those kids constantly. They do shit to me. They don't have criminal records. They don't care. They truly don't care. So they're going to punish the parents. They're going to say, well, you're a bad parent. You know what's there. They're going to get pissed. I'm not just having a list by any means. I mean, I don't know what you do to punish yourself. If you think you're going to 3 hours, I'm going to take that over again. You know, but I just don't see the reason you should punish yourself. $1,000 is a lot of fucking money, Dad. You don't need to be giving up the grand because listen to fucking retard. I do it all the time for my kids, Mike. Oh, I know, but I mean, I think the best thing to do is to shut off the source. That's what you got to do then. You're exactly right. I'm going to go out here and just blow my fucking brains out, and there's the source. Then you guys can do what the fuck you all want to do. And you know, Mike, it solves my goddamn problem. I don't have to fucking worry about this anymore. I don't have to listen to these bullshit fucking lies, excuses, and horseshit from everybody around me. The only people I really give a rat's ass from. I don't have to keep away from people who I should be out going trying to socialize and maybe make an own life for myself because I have children that don't like someone I might meet. I want you to go and meet somebody. Right, Mike, and you did exactly that whenever I married Barbara, right? I was fucking 8 years old then, and I didn't still did deal. I fought with John, I knew that was every department. I was not like Red James. You can't see that I was. Okay? I never disliked Barbara. I didn't get along with that well, but I never came into that when you married Barbara. Not one time. You can't ever say that I did. Okay? I got along with Barbara to a point because I was a little shit. Yeah, and I was a silent brat, but I was never to the point where Daddy, I hate Barbara. I never said that. Not one time. I respected Barbara because she was honest. And she didn't fuck around. She got right to the point. You know, you have to respect that. And I was glad you were happy, Dad. fucking people that they just want to go after someone when there's no way they can protect themselves because they're there with the person. There's no double witnesses and stuff. You're going to keep fucking video cameras on all your children all the time and every conversation you have with that. This is the insanity of this fucking state. This is the insanity of all this bullshit, Mike. And I'm exhausted, mate. I don't want to be involved in this kind of shit. This is forcing me to live like my fucking cousins and my parents and my family, trash and filth and all this other kind of shit going on constantly. Never being loud. You know, my secrets are always told everywhere by a big mouth, which leaves me no alternatives whatsoever. And you can never protect yourself. You have to sit back and eat it. Of course, there's no foundation for them or I'd be in jail. But you just watch the people slowly walk away from you, slowly don't want nothing to do with you. You say to yourself, you know, this is insane. I'm worried my life sucks. And it's just terrible. I can have a good time with Sarah so long as Alissa doesn't do. She's always in there with something. I don't give a fuck what it is. Now I'm going to have to put up with and deal with some fucking little cocksucker that's doing all kinds of shit to this family. What's your birthday? And go to jail? Hang on a second. I'll talk to you later, Mike.
Judge, may we approach?
You may. On or off? Ladies and gentlemen, the attorneys have advised me that right now would be a good time for us to take our afternoon recess. So we'll break a little early for our mid-afternoon break. It's about 3:40 or 2:40 right now. Please be back in the jury room at about 2:55, a little before 3 o'clock. You can leave everything in the courtroom if you'd like. Please remember the admonition. The jury's now excused. Please be seated. Let the record reflect the presence of counsel and the defendant. Jury's not present. Anything for the record from the state?
No, Your Honor, just obviously, I do object to this being played. Obviously, in its form, we have no objection to this based on your ruling, but I still do object to this as hearsay, as irrelevant.
I don't know that we've identified what we're talking about. This is the recording of the conversation between Alissa and Aunt Lynette.
Yes, the one that they're playing next. We would object to that. We do not object to the form that is now. We still object to the whole thing, but as it's played here, we have no objection to this one based on your ruling.
You have provided your requested redactions and the state has made the redactions.
Yes.
All right. So based on the court's previous statements, the court will admit the redacted exhibit containing a audio recording of the conversation between Alissa and Aunt Lynette.
And so the record's clear. The exhibit, the redacted version, Your Honor, is Exhibit 125, which we'll be moving to admit.
Duly noted.
Exhibit 91 is still marked.
And that's the unredacted version. Okay. We will be at recess until 2:55. Please be seated. We're back on the record in State versus Turney. Let the record show the presence of counsel, the defendant, and the jury. Detective Anderson is back on the witness stand. Mr. Bailey, you may resume your direct examination of the witness whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Judge. We just heard a call that took place between the defendant and his son, Michael Seth Turney.
That is correct.
And you said there was not of the same subject matter, but there are numerous calls from the defendant to other individuals.
To other individuals, other institutions, and those are both incoming to the home, outgoing from the home. There's a ridiculous volume of fax squeal that's captured by that recorder. It's sensitive enough that it picks up any use of that home phone.
All right. Judge, I have exhibit number 125. The state is seeking to omit it this time.
All right, and subject to the previous objections, any additional objections? The exhibit 125 is admitted.
And may I publish it?
You may.
Is this the call that we're about to listen to? Is this a call between Alissa and her Aunt Lynette?
Yes, that's her maternal aunt, Lynette, the one who at the time resided in California.
And
I have spoken to her myself personally. I've met with her personally. It was Detective Summershoe who did the formal interview with her.
there has assume there's been some testimony that she is now deceased. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Die or something? Are you pregnant? No. Hell no. Are you ever gonna? Yes. This is your Aunt Lynette. I swear. I'm going to believe you. I know. No, and I don't know, he's like flipping out over it, and I don't know why I felt stupid. Why you feel stupid? No. Like, I don't know, some guy he doesn't want me to see. Yeah, how old is he? 19. What? 19. And you're what, 16, 17? 17. But I'm not like talking to him anymore. My dad thinks I am. Well, I'm wondering why your dad is calling me and Alissa, I need you to talk to me. I need you to tell me why. I have no clue why he called you. Well, you have to have a clue. I don't know. You have to. You don't really know why he called me. He just called me like 5 minutes ago. I was like freaking out on the phone. What did he say? He said that he needs me to call and talk to you because he doesn't know what's going on. I mean, I should say more in detail. I'm wondering if he's drinking. No, he's not. Why is he freaking out all of a sudden? It's my dad. What do you expect? Huh? What do you expect? He's always like that. He hasn't done that in like many a year. Because you haven't been around him. I know I haven't been around him. That's why I'm wondering why all of a sudden he's freaking out. Like, oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? I don't know. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Huh? Yeah. Are you have you dealt with Mom's death? Oh yeah. And you're okay? Yeah. I need you to promise. Are you okay? Yeah. I mean, I need a promise. No, I am. I'm fine. Have you talked to John lately? No. John? He doesn't like to talk about it. He doesn't like to talk about Mom's death? Yeah. Well, but I mean, have you talked to him? Yeah. Just communication. Oh, yeah, also. Does he live there? Does John live there? No. Okay. But he comes over every day. So you're okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay. Are you sure? I scared the holy crap right out of me. Yeah. Like, oh my God. Yeah. You're okay, girl, huh? Yeah. Now, if I talk to your dad, is he going to tell me something different? No. What? Yes? Who's that? My dad. What's his problem? I don't know. Unless you have problems, you can always call me. My dad has it. Okay. I didn't mean to scare her, but I talk to you. Yeah. Okay, Dad. I said I didn't mean to scare you. You said it scared the crap right out of me. Like, oh. It's nice talking to you. It's nice talking to you too. Are you growing up real big? Yeah. Sure. Big old tower over me now, huh? No, I'm short. I'm not tall. You're what? I'm short. You're short? Yeah. How tall are you? I don't know, like about 5'6". Maybe a little bit shorter. Oh, really? Yeah. Because Mama was about 5'6". I think Barb was what, 5'6". I don't know. Well, I just have long blonde hair, that's all.
Long blonde hair.
Yep. That's all.
Well, nice to hear from you. Nice to hear your voice. And you know what? I'm so sorry that did you go out to Disneyland too?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, John. I talked to John, and he said I told him I said call me on Monday. I said we can get together and we us three, you three there and yourself and John, we can go all out and have dinner. Well, he didn't call me the whole day on Monday, so I thought, well, they must have blew me off.
Oh, how sad.
And then he called me, and I was gone. I had to take my dog to the doctor's, and I was running around all day, and I didn't get home till late. I called next on Wednesday because I thought Sarah said you guys are going to be there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Yeah, we
So I
were.
called the place there where you guys are staying to get your, called the hotel. Said, asked if you guys are still there, and he said, oh no, they left.
Oh. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. You know what, Alissa?
Yeah.
If you ever want to come out and visit me, I'm right here.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
let me talk to your dad first.
Okay.
I love you.
Love you.
He has no additional questions.
Mr. Bailey, I know outside the presence of the jury, we talked about the timing of that phone call, which the jury may have a question about. Were you going to elicit any testimony about the timing of that phone call?
Did you listen to this phone call and document it in your report?
Yes,
Does Alissa talk about how old she was during this phone call?
she identifies herself as 17.
And all right, I have no additional questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Jackson.
Just briefly, Detective, in regards to that, since we're talking about it, do you know what month Alissa was born?
What month that phone call took place?
Or what month Alissa was born?
Yes, she was born 4/3 of 84.
Okay, so that would have been somewhere between 4/3 and 5/17, correct?
Yes, there's about a 6-week window there.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jackson.
You were assigned this case in about 2008, correct?
September of 2008.
And at that point, you were assigned as a case agent.
That's correct. I inherited the entire queue for S through Z, and Alissa Turney falls within that queue.
T being after S, correct?
Yes.
As case agent, you were in charge of the case, correct?
I'm responsible for the overall direction, documentation, and progress of the investigation. That's true.
You can steer the investigation on what to do. You have other people working with you, but you may give assignments to people like, hey, can you go talk to this person, or you go talk to that person?
That is correct. In this particular venue, I do not have any sort of authority or rank over my coworkers, but we all work together cooperatively. We divide up tasks, and I'm the one who decides who's going to go do what.
So when you tell them what to go do, they'll report back to you in either person or in form of a supplement, correct?
Correct. Documentation or informing me what had happened.
As case agent, you would be responsible for submitting evidence to crime lab for DNA or other stuff like that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What people to interview? If you wanted.
Yes, the people that we decide to interview are the people that we can find based on that life pattern. And then whoever I can get to assist me with those interviews, I put them into play.
And if you are sending someone to interview someone that you know in the case, you would give them some background information about the case so they know what to interview this person about, correct?
Yes, we actually do that in a much more formal setting. We actually sit down. We would sit down in missing persons every 2 weeks or so, and we would roundtable cases.
So everybody in the missing person is somewhat familiar with the other cases that are going on.
Yes, and in addition to Alissa Turney, there are other cases we discuss. Other detectives have their own cases.
So in 2008, when you started missing person, you received a handful of cases already, correct? There was how many in that S through Z?
There were quite a few, I think in excess of 200. But again, that includes recent cases. I probably picked up 6 that day.
And while that's going on, you're getting new cases.
Yes.
So in October, you got new cases of 2008. November, you got new cases, correct?
On September 4th, I got new cases. On September 5th, I got new cases. September 6th, I got new cases, and on and on. And then Monday, you get everything from Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay. So one of those cases was Alissa Turney.
Yes.
And when you get the file, The first thing you need to do is review it, correct?
Correct.
You want to find out what has already been done.
Yes, you want to look for the current status of the case.
You want to familiarize yourself with the case.
Yes.
And in this case, when you reviewed it, not a lot had been done, correct?
Yes, I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world to be critical of somebody else's work at a different time.
But not a lot was done, correct?
Correct.
You had a few reports from different detectives along the way.
That is correct.
You had items that Mr. Turney had given the previous detectives,
Yes, items that he had faxed in.
emails that he had sent.
If they were captured and notated by a detective, I don't recall any emails other than what Mr. Turney had recovered and sent to us.
So the original report was that a 17-year-old girl had run away, correct?
Correct.
And that took place on May 17th, 2001.
That's correct. Approximately 10:51 at night is when the call came in.
That's what's documented on that initial report, correct?
Yes, by Officer Philpott, a civilian former officer, Philpott.
Explain that. What do you mean, a former civilian or former?
He was a former sworn officer who had returned to a process we call callback. Basically, he takes low priority items that are called into either 911 or our non-emergency service, and he deals with them and addresses them on the phone instead of dispatching an officer.
And that's sometimes referred to as like a civilian aide or an officer aide sometimes?
Yes.
And so you don't have to be a police officer to do that specific job, correct?
No, not at all. Typically, when we have injured officers, that's an option for them to stay busy, fulfill their hour commitments.
So it just happens to be that this person who took the case, took that call, was an ex-police officer.
I believe he was, yes.
In that report, they talked about her leaving a note.
Yes.
The note was found in the bedroom
Yes.
by her father and her sister.
Correct.
In the note, she said she was going to California.
Yes.
At some point, you did it much later. You had DPS Crime Lab analyze that, correct?
That's correct.
And the handwriting was a match.
Yes, for Alissa Turney.
And I guess we can talk about how did you go about doing that? How did you what steps did you take to be able to have that note analyzed?
I contacted Sarah Turney, and one of the things we wanted to obtain were samples of her handwriting. And in addition to that, I actually asked Sarah to reproduce the note in her own handwriting as a comparative basis.
And you had other people do that too also, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Turney also wrote that note out?
Yes.
And in that note, she also talked about taking $300 from her dad, correct?
Yes.
And as you investigated, you had talked to family members and other people and learned that there was sometimes cash on hand in the house?
Yes, that was remarked, yes.
There was no evidence found that Alissa had a credit card?
No, no credit card. I could never confirm whether she had a debit card or access to that account.
I was going to say there's no evidence that she even had a debit card either, correct?
That's correct. It's in 2008, it was not possible for me to verify that information.
And it was determined through your investigation that Alissa could not access her bank account without her father, correct?
That I will disagree with you.
You will disagree? Are you familiar with the report from Detective Fremen?
Detective Fremen?
F-O-R-E-M-N-Y with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office.
Oh, okay. Yes, Maricopa County Attorney's Office, an investigator with Maricopa County, yes.
Yes, and as the case agent in this case, you are responsible for reviewing all the documents, correct?
That is correct.
To the best of your ability.
Yes.
And did you ever read this report?
Yes, I have reviewed everything in here.
Okay. And Tabitha Alessier was someone who worked for
Desert.
the bank. Does
That's
that name
correct.
sound familiar?
It does.
And she was told that in 2001, a minor would be required to have a parent present when making a withdrawal, correct?
That is correct.
There's some evidence based on the records in the account that she might not even have known how much money was in her own account, correct?
We recovered statements at the time she would deposit or withdraw money. Whether she read them or not, I cannot say.
Well, every single one of those deposits with those slips, Mr. Turney was present, correct?
Yes, there's indication that he, in addition to Alyssa's signature, he affixed either the statement PVUHS ID, indicating Paradise Valley Union High School ID, and typically with Mr. Turney's driver's license above it.
Because banks usually require some form of identification.
Absolutely.
And there's evidence that you presented that money was being transferred into her account
Yes.
from Mr. Turney.
Yes.
The account was opened by Mr. Attorney and the initial deposit was done by him, correct?
Yes, he funded the accounts for himself and both of his children.
And we'll get into some of the bank records here in a second, but I kind of want to stay chronologically here. So the first detective that was assigned was Detective Schoenfelder, correct?
That is correct. He received the initial runaway juvenile report.
And there was not a lot of notes or reports on what Detective Schoenfelder had done in this case, correct?
There were absolutely zero supplements created by Detective Schoenfelder. He did have notes, but they're literally written onto the case file. There are no supplements.
So there was handwritten notes on a case file?
Yes.
Did you ever make copies of those?
Yes.
There were some letters and some documents that Mr. Turney had turned over to Mr. Schoenfelder, correct? That was in the file?
Yes, that was in the file.
Now, after Detective Schoenfelder, Detective Murphy came on, correct?
Sometime later, yes.
2003 or 2004?
Up until right before I arrived, yes.
Now, based on some of the documents that you reviewed, there is evidence to show that Mr. Turney was actively contacting different people within the police department, correct?
Yes.
And that started as early as May and up to 2007, 2008, correct?
I would even go before that. We have evidence that a postcard was mailed from Detective Schoenfelder to the family home. The phone number that had been recorded for Mr. Turney was not accurate. Mr. Turney had that in his possession. We recovered it during the search warrant. That would have at least elicited a phone call. And since the phone call was then corrected, I'm assuming Mr. Turney did respond and actually speak with Detective Schoenfelder.
No, but I'm saying between May 17, 2001 until you came on, there's documentation in the file that Mr. Turney was actively contacting police and interacting with them at that point, correct?
Absolutely.
Now, there was some mention of a letter, and I want to, may I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Show you what's been marked as Exhibit 111. This has been entered. Do you remember reviewing this?
Yes.
Do you know when that document was written?
When it was written, it's dated February 23rd, 1999. I do not believe that to be a correct date.
Okay. And why do you believe that not to be a correct date?
Because it's speaking of a situation that did not unfold until 2001.
And that's kind of what I want to get at. So the date on that is inaccurate, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. I mean, there's no reason for him to reference a runaway report from 2001 if he's creating a document February 23rd, 1999. So I would assume the date is inaccurate.
Now, I want to ask you a few things about this document to see if we can.
You want me to hang on to it?
I'll publish it.
Awesome.
To see if we can kind of maybe narrow down when this document was written.
Is this document in evidence?
It is. It's already been admitted. I believe. Let me double check. Yes. So this letter is entitled Letter of Appreciation for Detective Schoenfelder and Sergeant Bob White, correct?
That is correct.
And it sounds like, if you read the bottom paragraph here, it says, the purpose of this letter is to praise you officers for their assistance in understanding my situation so I can make the best decisions I can for what is in the best interest of my daughter. Correct? You agree with that?
Yes, you read that correctly.
There is, and I'm trying to, there is some mention here in this last paragraph about it is Quest that failed to understand the significance of the federal laws that were designed to protect citizens. So it sounds like he's discussing a little bit about that Quest problem that he had, correct?
May 24th, 2001. That's correct. So my interpretation was this is sometime after May 24th.
So this would have to be after May 24th, correct?
Yes. Yes, there's no reason for him to mention those two detectives who are the current case agent and the current supervisor for the unit, the 2001 report, and then an event that is known to have happened on May 24th.
And there's some talk in some of the investigation that went on that at some point he was quite critical of things that Detective Schoenfelder had done, correct?
Absolutely.
So when did that occur, you know?
When did he become critical?
Yeah. Is there anywhere where he's being critical? Do you have a date in mind of when he started saying that Detective Schoenfelder wasn't doing anything?
There are victims advocates information that I obtained through subpoena.
Mhm.
In that, Mr. Turney is speaking to an assigned victim's advocate, Charmaine Ashworth.
Okay.
He would often express displeasure at the pace of the investigation, state that people aren't following up correctly. He would state that Detective Murphy did not understand things. She was snickering at him.
Well, that's much later because Detective Murphy's not till 2003, 2004. We're talking about Detective Schoenfelder, correct?
Correct.
I asked you, is there a point in time when Detective Schoenfelder, he became agitated about things that he was doing?
I do not remember a specific point in time. It was sometime after May 24th.
And there is some documentation where he contacted sergeants and police chief asking them to investigate the disappearance of his daughter.
Yes.
Based on the phone records that were received from this, were you able to determine what efforts Mr. Turney took to get those phone records?
You're referring to the Quest call on May 24th?
Yes.
Yes, he contacted Quest. He requested the month of May, I believe. He was told that there's a significant financial request. I believe it was $10,000 to provide that information. He objected to that. He contacted NCMEC requesting their assistance. He contacted the Phoenix Police Department, reported the call, and then requested their assistance in obtaining the phone number.
And did Phoenix Police Department help in getting that phone call?
No, we did not serve any sort of legal process. When you have a 17-year-old who...
I'm not asking you why. Did Detective Schoenfelder ask for those records?
No, he did not.
Is that something he could have done? He could have asked for a subpoena, correct?
The subpoenas are based on a legal precedent, a
I'm
reason.
asking you a question. As a detective, are you allowed to get subpoenas? Have you subpoenaed phone records before?
I have, yes.
Okay. And so that is something that he could have done.
In a criminal investigation, yes.
So he attempted to sue Quest for the telephone records, correct?
He threatened to sue Quest for the telephone records. They settled by providing him specific records on 517.
Your Honor,
and
I'd object at this point and direct Detective Anderson to answer the question and not add whatever he feels is appropriate.
Sir, let's make sure you're listening to the question and then answering the question that's been asked. Mr. Jackson, why don't you re-ask the question?
He attempted to sue Quest for telephone records from the call from 5/24/2017, correct?
Yes,
And at some point he got those records, correct? From Quest, he received the records.
he did receive records from Quest.
And that took about 6 weeks.
Yes.
Now, are you aware of anything that Mr. Turney did after receiving those records in an effort to find Alissa? Did he go to California?
He stated that he had gone to California.
And actually, there is phone records that show that he has roaming charges while he was in California making phone calls, correct?
That is correct.
You would later find documentation of attempts that Mr. Turney was attempting to contact detectives,
Yes, Mr. Turney contacted detectives frequently.
sergeants.
I do not remember precise records to the sergeants, but I know for a fact that he contacted our intake secretary and requested to be sent to sergeants. We have recorded phone calls of those.
He contacted the NCMEC, which NCMEC, I think is the quick term, or
NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
and that first contact to NCMEC was 5/25/21, correct?
Yes, based upon the date of the letter he sent to them.
And that was about 8 days after Alissa became a missing person, correct?
Yes,
There's phone conversations that were reviewed by either yourself or other officers of efforts attempt to talk to congressmen about trying to get help for Alissa, correct?
correct,
Trying to draw attention to his daughter's case.
correct.
But despite those efforts, Detective Schoenfelder never decided to interview anyone in regards to this investigation, correct?
That is correct.
Didn't interview any friends.
Friends of Alyssa's? No,
He didn't interview any of her coworkers.
he did not.
He didn't talk to any neighbors.
No neighbors.
No one came to the house to investigate the home.
Never went to the home.
No one attempted to get phone records.
Never attempted to get phone records from Quest.
And we talked about, well, I'm not talking Quest, I'm talking about cell phone records, different stuff like that. No phone records were
No
ever.
phone records.
And you're aware that back in 2001, maybe the cell towers were different. There was less of them and triangulation was a little broader, but you could still track down where someone was based on cell phone tower records, correct?
Absolutely. It was a frequent process I did as a domestic violence detective.
And you became a detective in what year?
2007.
And I guess for reference, 2007 cell phone towers are more like 2001, or was 2007 more like they are today?
I think they were more like they were in 2001. Typically, you'd be able to pull in azimuth, which would give you the facing from where the call came from and an estimated distance. But that was about it.
And now with Google and other things, sometimes we can put a pinpoint right on sometimes or within a smaller area, correct?
We can follow you walking down the sidewalk.
So after Detective Schoenfelder, we discussed that it then became Detective Murphy.
Correct.
There are some documentations of things that that she did, correct?
Yes,
She did file some police reports.
she did.
She followed up on a few things that she had learned from Mr. Turney.
I would say everything that Mr. Turney directed to her, she responded to.
And a lot of those things that she gave him were things that he actually had gotten back pretty early, correct?
Yes,
The information about an individual named Paul Abbott, who was someone who was at frequent person who would be at Jack in the Box, correct?
yes, yes.
And but under her watch, no one interviewed the family.
I believe John Turney was at a time a point of contact with the family, and she would have had conversation with him. She also arranged for Sarah Turney and John Turney to come down and provide the DNA sample.
And actually, Mr. Turney brought them both down to that, correct?
He drove, yes.
Now, and I guess maybe that was a bad question on my part. There was no formal interview done of any family members at that point.
No, there was no formal interview of any family member prior to 2008.
So under Detective Murphy's watch, no family member was officially interviewed.
Yes,
No friends were officially interviewed.
correct,
No coworkers.
correct,
No one came to the house.
correct,
No one attempted to get that video
correct,
or phone records.
also correct.
Now, you testified that you worked as a missing persons detective for a lot of cases. I'm guessing if you're getting 6, 7 cases a day, sometimes.
I think it would be around 4,000 cases over the 7 to 8 years I was there, roughly half of what Summershoe did.
And I guess it would be, and if I'm wrong, you can tell me, but sometimes when teenagers run away, they're found very quickly.
Yes,
Sometimes they just want to go do something and they show back up.
far and away, the majority of them are self-recovery.
Sometimes they return in a few hours,
Yes,
a few days,
yes.
sometimes a few weeks.
Weeks to, I want to say 3 to 5 months. Outside of that, the interest is accelerated.
Sometimes when they leave, they contact family and make other living arrangements.
Absolutely.
Or sometimes they run away and something happens to them. That also happens, correct?
Yes,
You have worked with runaways before.
yes, I have.
They're a vulnerable population.
Absolutely.
Over the years, you have heard or about or worked sex trafficking cases.
I have.
Arizona is a corridor, one of the main corridors for sex trafficking.
Yes, 5th largest city in the United States, and the statistics to back it up.
And runaway population are known risk factors for sex trafficking.
Yes, they are.
People with mental health issues,
Also,
drug use.
absolutely.
Now, when you're investigating a runaway, it's really important to learn about their life, correct?
Yes,
You're trying to gain information to try to determine a pattern of life, I think was the word that you used.
that is typically what we call it. Yes,
Are they happy with their job? Are they happy with their friends? Are they happy with their boyfriend?
yes,
Are they happy with their family?
absolutely.
So you try to investigate the people in their life.
Yes,
You need to investigate the types of things that they're doing.
yes,
You need to get to know the missing person because it can help you track them down.
yes. Understanding the person is intelligence geared towards figuring out what happened to them.
So in 2008, when you get on September 2008, you look at this file and you realize that not a lot has been done, correct?
I believe I referred to it as my most anemic case.
And, sometimes I think in our interview, we discussed it. You talked about it's easy to sit back and Monday morning quarterback it, correct?
Yes, it is.
But isn't it true that the first few days, few hours are when a lot of that information is very important, correct?
For a concerned missing person, yes.
Now, you mentioned that when you got on the case, 7 years had passed, correct?
Yes, 2001 to 2008,
Almost 7.5, probably by the time a
September.
lot of the investigation was going on.
That's correct.
And what concerning to you was the fact that no one had heard from her since May 24th.
Yes, yes,
Typically, it's your experience that if a runaway is unhappy with their living situation, that could change once they turn 18. They no longer have to come back to the home, correct?
Correct.
Now, you read letters that she wrote to her friends.
Yes.
You wanted to talk to these people to find out what they could tell you about her as an individual, correct?
I felt that was an appropriate course of action. Yes.
You look at her school records.
Yes.
These are the type of things you're interested in, her hobbies and stuff like that.
Yes. How did she spend her time? Who did she spend her time with?
Anything that might give you insight into where she may have went.
Yes.
So the minute you noticed that stuff wasn't done, you started setting up interviews with family members, correct?
Yes. I'm not going to give up on a case because it wasn't done to my satisfaction.
You called coworkers,
I
contacted coworkers, or
contacted coworkers again in that roundtable environment where we discussed concerning cases.
neighbors.
Yes.
You started looking into Alissa herself.
Yes.
Again, we talked about the letters. You read letters. You reviewed her school records.
Yes.
She was a C student, I believe. You said she had a 2.29 GPA.
2.44 to 2.29. So C, C plus.
You discovered that she had an IEP.
I was told that she has an IEP. There are recordings from Paradise Valley High School suggesting that her IEP had expired and was not renewed.
When she was at Barry Goldwater, she was in classes, correct?
Yes, she had an IEP specific to math.
And actually reading also.
There was a concession made to add on reading because she had low scores in reading.
So if there's a concession, that would mean that her IEP included reading and math, correct?
That's correct. The resources they provided for her were specifically for her math.
All through middle school and elementary school, she had an IEP.
I'm not aware of her middle school.
You had learned that through your investigation that she had skipped school.
Oh, yes.
There was underage drinking,
Yes.
experimenting with drugs
Experimenting with marijuana specifically.
and other drugs. There was mention from other people that they're drugs.
There was
other drug
mention
use.
of mushrooms. My understanding of that situation was that she ate a mushroom found in a yard.
Okay. And there was also ecstasy mentioned.
Yes, that was mentioned
There was information that she was engaging in risky behavior,
specifically.
having sex with adults,
Yes, having sex with older men
potential behavioral issues.
specifically.
She's using drugs.
Oh,
Drugs are illegal,
summary,
correct?
drugs are illegal. Yes,
She's having sex with adults. That's
Yes.
illegal for the adult, correct?
that is very illegal for the adult.
These are things that you learned while you were looking into her as a missing person, correct?
That is correct.
Now, you would agree, as a parent, these things could seem concerning.
I have 2 daughters. I would use a word more strong.
One of the things you learned that she had a boyfriend, correct?
Yes,
Now, there are some information shared with you that Alissa and John were having issues or some conflict, correct?
there was information shared suggesting that. That's correct.
You had learned that Alissa was crying over John quite a bit.
Can you give me a specific reference to her crying over him?
I'm gonna have to look up. I only have it as a bait stamp, and I realized when you were doing your direct that you don't have bait stamps, you have regular. So it'll take me 1 second.
No problem.
It
A
is
supplement number is
Supplement 168,
168.
I believe. Let me see. Be under tape B. Can I have it if you want to?
If you have it handy.
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Tape B, tape 8.
Sorry, 8.
Yes, tape 8. Alyssa says, Sorry,
This is your refresh
you did-
recollection. You read
yes.
this off, and let me know if that refreshes your recollection.
yes, this does. This is actually my supplement.
Yes. And so that was a tape that you personally had reviewed, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was a conversation between,
Jessica Case and Alyssa Turney.
and in that call, she references that, says that he makes her cry sometimes, correct?
Yes, John makes her cry sometimes.
There's information that you received through video from Mr. Turney that there was a fight between
Yes.
the two of them,
Yes.
which either occurred May 6th or May 16th?
I
That's what the videos say.
it was May 6th or May 16th. Yes.
So now I want to ask you about these two, I guess, the picture here, but these two exhibits. It would be exhibit 32 and 31.
The 2 VHS tapes from earlier today.
Yes. And the reference, I believe it is 122 and 123, correct? This is 123. This is the tape that you received from Mr. Turney
September 28th. That's correct.
when you went to the house.
That is, no, I went to the house on the 12th. I returned to the house to pick up that tape.
Yeah, but this, you picked it up at the house. That's what I was
Yes.
saying. And on here, it says 5601 and Alissa and John Lockman.
Yes.
And then there's this tape that is also, this was found in the search warrant,
Yes.
51601, correct?
16 or 06, 56. It looks like a 16 to me. Correct.
And based on those two tapes, you don't know which one is the original, correct?
I cannot tell you that.
Now, there's also evidence that was presented to you or you learned throughout this that she was cheating on her boyfriend, correct?
Yes.
There was testimony from her sister that she had gotten,
I'm going to object at this point, Judge. Lack of personal knowledge, you're saying?
I haven't heard the question yet.
well, maybe approach, I think I mean,
You may.
so after learning all that information about John and Alyssa's relationship, did you ever ask John about the specific instances that Sarah talked about?
No, it was Detective Summershoe who interviewed Lackman. I was reviewing it, watching the interview.
And while you're reviewing it, did you know about the information that Sarah had shared with you?
Yes, I did the interview with Sarah, so that information came in through me.
Well, the information you learned about Sarah happened in January 29th of 2009, correct?
Sarah was one of the earliest interviews.
Well, you spoke with Sarah several times, correct?
Yes.
The specific instances where she told you about, and she testified about this, about the violence between
Violent
the two.
grabbing.
Yes, that happened on January 29th, 2009.
That came, during a later interview.
When was the interview with Mr. Lackman? Do you remember?
Before January 29th.
So after learning that information, learning that he was violent with her, that there was bruises on her face, that he's potentially slammed her hand into a car, did you go and investigate and ask him about those things specifically?
No, I did not follow up on that. I had some credibility issues with that statement.
You had credibility statements with what Sarah had said.
Yes.
She personally saw this.
Yes.
Because that was her testimony to you, is that she personally saw this, correct?
Yes.
So you didn't even bother asking him about it.
Lackman? No.
Yeah. You watched the video between the two of them having their fight? The one that happened on either 5/6 or 5/16?
The incident involving Alissa Turney and John Lackman,
Yes.
where she leaves the home following him, returns to the home and throws the phone against the wall?
Yes, you've seen that incident,
Yes.
correct? Now, Alissa was working at Jack in the Box for about 6 months.
Approximately, yes.
You learned as part of your investigation that she wasn't happy with her job, correct?
No, I have the one statement between her and Jessica Case where she said the people at Jack in the Box were messed up or really weird.
And she hates working there. That's what she told her, correct?
That is the one statement.
That she hates working there.
Yes.
So you did learn at least some information that she didn't like her job.
I heard her espouse that complaint to her friend Jessica Case.
And so did you learn how often she got paid as part of your investigation?
I believe it was every 2 weeks, there would be a check cut. It arrived on Friday evenings, typically dispersed over the weekend.
And so she worked for about 6 months and it was every 2 weeks, which you have about 12 or 13 paychecks.
The math is correct.
And we'll get back to some of the phone records here in a second, but there was only 2 paychecks ever deposited into her account, correct?
That's the documentation that we've recovered would suggest that, yes.
Now, you also said that at some point you did a few search warrants. You submitted some search warrants that did some searches of some house, correct?
Yes, submitted search warrants. Pardon me. Yes.
Yes. And one was for the Turney home that they were renting in 2001 when Alissa left the runaway note.
Yes.
The other was a home that they had purchased frequently after, but the one they were living at in 2008, correct?
Correct.
And they were living at that place, and I would mean Sarah and Mike, in 2008 when the search warrant went through, correct?
Correct. When the service was performed.
Going into the first house in 2001, the house where they were living at in 2001, you guys entered that home?
Yes.
Were you present when that happened?
No.
You had people that were there working. I believe you said it was the homicide unit was there.
Yes, Detective Kenneth Porter, I believe.
And you reviewed their reports, and they sprayed with luminol.
Yes, they did perform a luminol process.
And that luminol is sprayed, and it can detect bodily fluid, particularly blood.
Yes.
And no blood was found in the home?
No, no significant scene, no indication of a clean scene.
Cadaver dogs were brought to the home?
Yes, both residences.
No alerts from the dogs? There was no alerts?
That is correct.
And typically, what is the dog looking for? What is the dog alerting to? Are you familiar with what the dog is alerting to?
Yes.
And what is that?
Decomposing human remains.
And that is something that happens almost immediately, correct?
The process begins when you stop breathing.
And obviously, the longer it's there, the more decomposition there is, correct?
Well, decomposition is the process of the earth reclaiming all the minerals and parts of your body. So eventually it will stop.
And the dogs didn't hit any areas of the house?
Nothing in the house, nothing in the backyard.
There was no physical evidence found in the house that a death had occurred, correct?
That is correct.
At some point, a car was searched, a vehicle, a truck. You tracked down a truck.
Okay, vehicles on the residence were searched at that time. You're referring to the 2001 Dodge pickup?
Yes.
Yes, I tracked that down to Nevada, Reno, Nevada, and searched it myself.
And just to kind of clarify that, are you suggesting that Mr. Turney drove to Nevada and sold that vehicle?
I'm not.
So the vehicle was found in Nevada. He sold it somewhere here in the valley.
That's correct. I believe it was the Scottsdale Air Park.
And cadaver dogs were also brought to that vehicle, correct?
No.
No, they were not?
No, I don't believe Reno had a cadaver dog.
Okay. But they searched the vehicle?
Yes, myself and Elaine Finley was the crime scene technician that went.
What did you guys do to that vehicle?
Searched it, recovered hair follicles, hair fibers, recovered some documentation related to Mr. Turney.
In the vehicle?
Yes.
No, you didn't find any blood?
No, no blood seen.
To this day, Alyssa's body has never been found?
That's correct.
No crime scene?
No crime scene has been established.
You can't tell us where Alyssa is?
No, I do not know where her remains are.
Or you don't even know if she is dead, correct?
I am very confident that she is dead.
You may be confident, but she may not be dead, correct? You cannot be 100% sure that she is dead.
I do not believe in UFOs or abductions. I believe she is dead.
And there's no physical evidence to support your statement, correct?
I do not have her body. That is correct.
There is no physical evidence to support your statement that she's dead.
I have evidence suggesting that this was a
physical evidence. You have physical evidence suggesting that she is dead.
I do not have her body. I do not have a physical human remain to show you and establish that she is dead.
Now I want to talk a little bit about the call. The call originated, and I'm referring to the 524 call. That originated after everything originated in Riverside, California, I believe. You're aware of that?
Yes, that's the May 24th, 2001, 5:02 a.m. call into the Turney home.
You have made reference to that call saying, we never found that call, correct? You searched all this evidence and there's no recording of that call, correct?
That is correct.
But there's no evidence or no one has ever said that that call was ever recorded, correct?
That is correct.
Did you ever go to that location in Riverside?
No,
And that was a payphone outside either a Circle K or a 7-Eleven or something, correct?
nondescript. It wasn't a high profile Circle K. It wasn't anything that I recognized. It may have been a California brand.
But a gas station type
Yes,
store like that.
gas station, convenience store located right off the freeway.
Now, you don't know where that call was answered, correct?
It was answered inside the Turney home.
But whether that was done on a phone in the bedroom or a phone in the living room.
I don't see that that makes any difference, but I don't know which handset was picked up.
Okay. So are you familiar with how these recordings operate?
How the recording device operates? Yeah, I have familiarity with the technology. I do not know the make and model that was in use in 2001.
So you don't have the one that's specifically here, correct? The one
The
that
one
was
from
used from 2001.
I do not have that.
But you received information from, I believe, Sarah or other family members that that physical recording device was in the kitchen, correct?
In the kitchen, and for a time, there was actually a location outside the home that maintained it.
That was a different house, though, correct? That was
Yes.
at the Villa Rita house.
Yes,
The house on 34th Street where Alissa disappeared, that device was in the kitchen, correct?
that is correct. The device was attached to the main line through the kitchen.
And that device only worked, Sarah said, when the receiver was picked up.
That device worked when the phone was answered.
You don't know what that device is, so how can you make that statement?
Well, I've reviewed literally hundreds of hours of phone calls where one person would be answering the call on one line and then pick up on another line.
Okay, but if you don't know where that original first person picked up, that could have been in the kitchen, correct?
That could have been in the kitchen, yes.
So you are aware of a device that records back in 2001 when I used a different receiver?
Yes, it's tied to the phone line. That's why it picks up the fax squeal.
No, I believe Sarah's testified that it was connected to that handset. It goes from the wall into the box. The receiver then goes into that box. And when you pick up the phone, there's a click. That was her testimony. Has she told you something differently?
She's not told me something differently. I have a different understanding of the technology.
You were unaware of this specific brand that was in their house in 2001.
Absolutely correct. I was not involved until 2008 and cannot reconstruct it, and have no opportunity to discuss it with anybody.
There were a lot of recordings and videos, correct?
Yes.
You personally didn't go through all of them.
No, I'd still be doing it.
Detectives' aides, officers assisted, volunteers,
Yes.
and they reviewed the tapes and the VCRs, the recordings.
Yes.
The officers that reviewed these recordings wrote supplements about the calls.
Yes, with the exception of the volunteers. The volunteers don't necessarily create supplements. If they find something, they will bring exceptional materials to us.
That was going to be my next point. The volunteers would then say, oh, I found something that's interesting, hand it to one of the detectives or yourself. Then you would review that and make a supplement, or the other detective would.
Almost exclusively to myself and Summershoe for our familiarity with the persons involved in the home.
But as case agent, you would be responsible to review all the reports that were written.
Yes.
In any of the tapes or videos found in the house, you never found any conversation where Mr. Turney admitted to killing Alissa, correct?
No, absolutely not.
In regard to video surveillance inside the home in the vent, you learned through your investigation that Alissa was aware this camera was there, correct?
Yes, she became aware of it.
Now, you spoke with Sarah on several occasions.
Yes.
You reviewed the reports by other detectives.
Yes.
Did she ever once tell you that her dad told her that the camera was put up in the vent?
Objection, hearsay.
Impeachment.
Can I hear the question again?
Alissa never told you that her dad said that the camera was put up in the vent and that Alissa
You're
was not
asking
to
if
know.
Alissa told him.
I confronted her about it, and she said she told people.
Alissa?
Sorry, Sarah. Sorry, I apologize, Sarah.
Okay, let's hear the question again.
Sorry. That Sarah told you that her dad said the camera was put up in the vent and that Alissa was not to know.
The witness may answer.
I do not recall that.
Now, I want to ask you about another statement that Sarah made in her interview. Now, you learned that at some point, Mike rented a Mustang, correct? And they went to California?
Yes, he and Sarah rented a Mustang. That was shortly after, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. And when was that, to your knowledge?
That was shortly after they had obtained the information suggesting the location of the call from California.
And she had mentioned that she remembered going to the beach and malls, correct?
Correct.
But she also specifically told you that she went to the payphone and it was outside a Circle K or 7-Eleven.
Yes, I believe they drove up to it, did not exit, possibly took a photo of it and then left.
Took pictures. Your dad took pictures of the phone booth and possibly the gas station.
That's my understanding, my recollection. If you're looking for something more precise.
She also told you that they were in that area where her aunt was, and she thought that her dad was staking out that location to see if Alissa was there, correct?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the bank records. We discussed them a little bit. I believe we have Exhibit 104 here. And Mr. Bailey went through this with you. You remember these records, correct?
Yes, I do.
Hit that AF button.
I'm looking for
That's
it.
you again, right? That's not me.
That's all me. I take my glasses off, I can read it. But now, these records here are from 4/26 to 10/5/01, correct?
That's true. They come in two separate statements. The dates for each statement are on the top right-hand corner. If you pull down a little bit, there you go.
Now, you referred to this, I believe, when asked when this 1860 was taken out. That essentially closed the account, but that's not true, correct?
That's not true. There's $25 left in the account. My understanding at the time that $25 is the minimum amount to maintain that account. So it is still at that point active. The heart of it has been removed.
So on October 5th of 2001, the account, Alyssa's account was not closed.
Not closed.
Now, we discussed the 515 deposit. That was a $200, was a withdrawal, correct?
Yes.
And that there was a deposit here of $10.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to how that would occur?
The deposit, I believe that there was a check that was presented, money was kept from the check, the remainder was deposited.
So potentially here, a check from Jack in the Box for $210.81. That would be, I want $200 back and put in the 1081.
Yes.
And that happened 2 days before she disappeared, correct?
Correct.
And then on 5/20/21,
21.
there was a deposit of $285.74, correct?
Yes, that would appear to be a full check with no remnant removed.
Are you aware if that was a check at all?
I'm not.
When looking into this, you have no idea where that $285.74 came from, correct?
That is correct. My assumption is based upon the dollar amount, the odd dollar amount, prior activity. It appears to be appropriate for a check.
But you don't know who cashed that check or deposited that check.
No, these records are from 2001. I'm not involved until 2008. I cannot tell you who dropped that. I did not recover a slip identifying that.
Now, you received other records from Desert Schools, correct?
Yes.
And those records were the records that started the account, I believe, in May of 2000.
Yes, the origination of the account?
Yes.
Yes.
And there's actually more records that show this, but the records then go to the same last day here of 10/5/01, correct?
That's correct. When somebody says that's the end of the account, it is still open. However, it has been depleted of funds.
And actually, that account accrued money over several years, correct? At some point?
Yes, it continued to accrue.
Because this is a savings account where a 3% return or something, correct?
2.75.
Okay. In reviewing those records from May of 2000 to May of 2001, was there any other deposit that was consistent with Alissa cashing her 12 checks or 13 checks at this Desert School account?
When you say depositing, does it appear that she's taking her check from Jack in the Box and depositing a full amount or a significant partial amount?
Any of it?
Any amount? No.
No. So there doesn't look to be, so we know that she was working for about 6 months.
Yes.
She obviously would be receiving checks,
Yes, she was being paid.
and those checks are not going into her bank account, correct?
Not in any significant dollar amount. She's keeping cash on hand, it appears.
There's no actual deposits from any checks, correct? Except for these two on 5/15 and 5/21.
Yes.
So all the other checks that she would have gotten, the ones from April, the ones from March, the ones from February, the ones from January, she did not attempt to deposit in this account.
Correct.
In your investigation, did you learn if she had any other bank account?
I'm not aware of any other bank account attached to her name or social security number.
And that is something that you guys looked into.
Yes.
You looked into credit reports to see if she had bought a house or opened a credit card in her name. You actually,
Access to any line of credit, Visa, MasterCard, debit card, Discover card, access to any sort of vehicle funds. She's not made any significant purchase of real estate or real property.
you actually looked into see potentially if she used the name of her dead friend Stacy.
Yes, we ran Alissa. We ran alterations of her name, different spellings of her name, subtle changes to her date of birth that she may have made. Stacy Seeley, combinations of Katie Rothweiler, Charity, anything I could come up with. Even her father's name of Strom.
Now, you're aware that there are ways to cash checks without depositing them to a bank account, correct?
Yes, that is apparently a booming industry these days.
There's check cashing.
Yes.
Sometimes grocery stores will let you buy groceries and give you the money back of the check sometimes, depending on who has the.
That is a fading practice, and it's typically restricted to an institution that has a familiarity with the checks that they are cashing.
Yes, and that would, but back in 2001, that was more common than it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Sometimes you can go to the bank that the check is drawn on and get it cashed there.
Very often.
So it looks like, at least based on those two checks, her paychecks would be anywhere between $210, $285, maybe a little more or less, depending on how many hours she worked that week.
Yes, I remember calculating how many hours she worked and her wage, and it was within that range. She was fairly consistent with her hours.
So if she had 10 or 11 other checks, she could potentially have anywhere from $2,000 to $2,200 in cash.
Correct.
And as we talked about before, because her dad was depositing money into this account and he opened the account, she may not known of how much money was actually in this account.
Yes, I understand your point. My counterpoint would be that she is receiving deposit slips. She has signed for deposit slips. She's presented identification. I cannot say that that bank teller gave the slip to her and that she read it.
So her dad was there with her through all three of those transactions that you're referring to, correct?
Every transaction that we have found involving Alissa had her father in some capacity.
So it's potential that he would have received that and she may not have known how much money was in there.
Absolutely possible.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit, and I don't want to tell me what Chris Ridenour had told you, but at some point you learned that Mr. Ridenour had written a letter, correct?
Correct.
And in that letter, do you know about when that letter was written?
From memory, I do not. It was shortly after Alyssa's disappearance.
Pretty close in time to when she was disappeared, correct?
Yes.
And I believe, I don't know, it was Detective Summershoe, or if it was you, but they're saying that this letter was asked to be written by Mr. Turney, correct?
That is correct.
But in this letter, and again, not going through it, his trying to get the urgency that something's wrong with his daughter, correct? He wants police to investigate. The purpose of this letter is to get police to investigate, correct?
Yes.
And that was early on in the case.
Yes.
Now, I also want to ask you about some other investigation that you did as things progressed. At some point, you received information from numerous different people, and without going into it, specifically someone in Connecticut who may have seen Alissa, or somebody that was claiming that Alissa was living in Connecticut, correct?
Can you tell me the time frame of that supplement?
I believe it was in 2000. There was a man who contacted you. He told you that his neighbor.
Speaking about his female neighbor.
Yes. You remember that?
Yes.
You guys investigated that.
Yes.
Went and got her DNA.
Yes.
Turns out it wasn't her.
It absolutely was not her. Yes.
You also got an email from Sarah Turney in August 10th of 2015, where someone had said that there was a woman by the name of
Sustained.
Your Honor, it goes into his lack of investigation. He didn't even go out and check on this person.
The objection was sustained.
Do you remember getting an email about this individual in California?
California, there's going to be more than one individual in California that was brought to the attention of the Phoenix Police Department, especially following the airing of that ABC program.
And specifically, there was information given to you that somebody believed that maybe this was Alissa.
Sustain.
Your Honor, this does not go to the sort of matter.
Sustain.
Did you ever go talk to this person, ever find out who that person was?
No, it was resolved through other more practical means.
No, it's you just believed it wasn't her. What other practical means?
The ability to substantiate that person through police databases, TransUnion, other social aspects.
But where in your report does it say that you did those things?
I don't necessarily document the lack of information. And again, I apologize. There are several persons that were brought to our attention that were simply not practical. We had people reporting to us that they saw that 17-year-old girl. They swear it was the 17-year-old girl and she was with an adult female. When that program aired, she was not 17. If she were alive at that time, it was 8 years later. So I did not expend effort in those cases.
But you actually looked into that one where Mr. Strom's wife had told you that she saw Alissa.
Sustain.
Your Honor, may we approach? I need to make a record.
I'll let you make a record at the end of the session today.
This is it. I have no further questions at this point.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our evening recess. I'll ask you to be back at 10:30 on Monday. Remember, we're not together tomorrow. Please take everything with you as you leave the courtroom. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you at 10:30 on Monday. We are now at recess. Jury's now excused.
Can we clone this judge or at least clone his efficiency and give Judge Lopez in Texas an efficiency transplant?
You're free to step down, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
For the record, show the presence of
like
counsel
to.
and the defendant. Jury's not present. Anything for the record from the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
From the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything for the
No, Your
record? Anything for the record from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, I find it troublesome that the rules here are not being followed. The witness here has testified that he did something or didn't do it because of a reason. This hearsay information has a clear exception under the rule. The rule is the effect on him. So the jury should be able to hear what information he learned before he decided to omit it and say that it didn't happen. This is a continual thing. It's the same thing with Heimer. It's the same thing with this witness. The detective has chosen a narrow path on how he's decided to investigate this case. By limiting these questions, you're not allowing us to let the jury know about this. This hearsay exception is there for a reason. It's there because it allows testimony like this to determine and let the jury know why someone did or didn't do something.
If you want to ask him that whether or not he investigated information that was provided to him in a letter or in a phone call or in an email, you can investigate. You can ask him whether he investigated that information. As to what the specific claims were in the email or the phone call, that is hearsay. I hear your argument. I understand your argument. I disagree with everything that is said to him is fair game because it had something to do with his investigation. If your claim is that you are not asking for the content to be introduced for the truth of the matter asserted, then the content is irrelevant and the effect on his investigation is relevant, and you are free to ask him that. You and I disagree on this issue, and I've made my ruling and you've made your record. Anything else you want to
Just
discuss?
further that I believe by limiting the defendant's right to a full trial, you are affecting his constitutional right to a fair trial. I believe that, and we will be making an offer of proof on Heimer as well as a directed verdict for corpus delicti, and I will have that hopefully to the court tomorrow. If not, it'll be over this weekend.
Okay. So on Monday, we're going to start with redirect of the officer, and then the state's going to rest.
That's correct. That's correct, Judge.
Okay. So counsel, I'm going to ask you to be here at 10. At 10 on Monday. We'll cancel that. You can just be here at 10:15. So we'll finish up with the officer, and then we'll figure out after the Rule 20 is argued, we'll figure out what's going to come next. I assume if you're planning on calling any witnesses other than your client, you'll have them here on Monday morning.
I guess the other question is if, I don't know how likely that is, but if the defendant chooses not to testify, would we roll straight into closing arguments on Monday?
Probably Monday after lunch. Yeah. All right. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you at 10:15 on Monday. We are adjourned.
Okay, well, there we have it. I suspect that because of the length of these court sessions, they all seem to be around the 6-hour mark, that the judge might do some business on other court matters before starting up on the trial, because there haven't been any 9-hour days like we had yesterday in Texas. So, but he's very efficient. Down in Texas, there's sidebar after sidebar after sidebar. Of course, that's a death penalty case. The stakes are higher. This is just second-degree murder, nobody case. So completely different type of case. But anyway, so time to get some sleep so that can get up early and do this all over again with Ronald Burgos Aviles. And there's speculation that the defense might possibly rest tomorrow. So we shall see what happens. If that does happen, we might be on jury watch for the verdict. So I wish our friends across the pond a good afternoon, and wish us over here a good night's sleep. So we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.